Hey, quick question. How many continents are there? 7? Maybe 5? There's no correct answer. According to different approaches, the range is between 4 to 7. But it might actually be as many as 8. Chances are, a lost continent has recently been found between Greenland and Canada. This new continent discovery could also potentially be the key to how microcontinents form. What does this all mean, and what makes this hidden landmass near Greenland so important? Now, if you're like me, and if you are, then there's 2 of us, when you hear the word continent, you probably think of land like Europe or Africa, places above water where people live. But in science, a continent isn't about being above sea level. It's about what the land is made of. Earth's outer layer, called the crust, comes in 2 main types, continental and oceanic. Continental one is thicker, lighter, and made of different types of rock, like granite. The oceanic crust is thinner, heavier, and made mostly of dark volcanic rock. Now, the discovery under the Davis Strait between Greenland and Canada appears to be a piece of continental landmass, even though it's under the ocean. Scientists call it a proto-microcontinent because it began to break off from a larger terrain millions of years ago, but never quite made it. As tectonic plates slowly shifted, the Earth's crust in this region stretched and cracked. One chunk started to split away, but for some reason, the process stopped. It didn't drift off like a full continent, and it didn't sink like ocean crust either. Instead, it stayed right there, floating beneath the waves all this time. This makes it different from true microcontinents, like Zealandia, which have completely detached and now exist as separate tectonic blocks. Zealandia is a submerged microcontinent near New Zealand. About 94% of it lies underwater, but because it's made of continental crust, many geologists say it qualifies as Earth's 8th continent. However, Zealandia is still debated because it's too big to be a microcontinent, and there's no official global body to define its status. There's no global organization like the UN or some kind of international geology council that can declare, hey, this is a new continent. Unlike Madagascar, which is fully above sea level and widely accepted by geologists as a classic example of a microcontinent, Zealandia is still waiting for a proper label. I know you're probably wondering, isn't Madagascar an island? The simple answer is, it's both. It's the 4th largest island in the world, completely surrounded by water. But it's also geologically considered a microcontinent because it broke off from the supercontinent Gondwana around 88 million years ago and is made of continental crust, not oceanic crust. Unlike volcanic islands like Hawaii, this isn't just built from lava. It's a real piece of ancient continental crust. So, Madagascar checks both boxes: island by geography, microcontinent by geology. And that's exactly why these discoveries can be fascinating. Just like Madagascar stands out above the waves, this newly discovered landmass under the Davis Strait stands out beneath them, thanks to its unusual structure. What makes it stand out is its unusual thickness. Most of the ocean floor is thin, like metal. This is more like packed clay, layered with continental materials. Underneath this cozy comforter, scientists discovered some odd layers of rock, unusual because they're not where they should be. These layers act more like the materials found on continents rather than those typically seen on ocean floors. There are hints of granite-like formations and distinct magnetic properties, which suggest that this stuff is similar to what makes up dry land. The size is also remarkable. The proto-microcontinent is about 12 to 15 miles across, which makes it roughly the size of a mid-sized city, like Manhattan Island that's 6,500 feet underwater. The fact that it sits right under the Davis Strait, one of the widest ocean passages on Earth, makes it one of the largest submerged continental fragments we've found. According to researchers, this landmass began to form between 58 and 49 million years ago, when Greenland and Canada were slowly drifting apart. Maybe they just weren't getting along. Hey, it happens. As they pulled apart, the crust under the Davis Strait stretched, and one of the main fault lines shifted. But the breakup didn't finish. Around 48 million years ago, the rifting stalled, and Greenland's motion away from Canada slowed dramatically when it later bumped into Ellesmere Island. It's like a car swerving off and then back onto the freeway, a turn that was never completed. That's basically what happened. A chunk of land got stuck between the motion. It didn't float off into the ocean like a new continent, and it didn't get pulled down into the earth either. It just stayed where it was, stranded beneath the water. But that's not all. This chunk has its own fault system, and scientists say it actually looks like a miniature version of the San Andreas Fault in California. Now, a fault is basically a crack in the Earth's crust where sections of rock slide past each other. Think of it as a place where the Earth's surface split and tried to slide sideways. In California, this movement still happens today and can cause earthquakes. But under the Davis Strait, it's a different story. The movement started, then suddenly stopped, like hitting pause in the middle of a big shift. It's a frozen moment in the planet's past, preserved right beneath the waves. For geologists, that makes the microcontinent under Davis Strait incredibly valuable. That sudden pause in motion helps explain why some chunks of land break away cleanly, while others twist, stall, or disappear. But this isn't just academic. By studying how continents break apart or stall, scientists can better predict future shifts in land, fault lines, and seismic activity. And predicting earthquakes and geological hazards could prove quite valuable to everyone. Knowing how microcontinents form could help us anticipate how the planet's surface might shift over millions of years, which affects everything from climate models to resource availability. But even just the technological advancement needed for such discoveries is greatly beneficial. The same tools used to map this hidden land are used for oil exploration, laying undersea cables, climate monitoring, and even search and rescue missions. Speaking of technology, for a long time, this hidden landmass near Greenland remained invisible. Just 10 or 15 years ago, the ocean floor under the Davis Strait was basically a mystery. It's deep, almost frozen, obviously not the easiest place to explore. But today, thanks to modern tools, a new continent discovery could be just a matter of time. Scientists can finally see and hear what's going on under all that water. First, they use seismic reflection imaging. That's a method where ships send sound waves down to the ocean floor and record how they bounce back. Various layers of rock reflect sounds in different ways, which helps build a picture of what's hidden underneath. It's kind of like how bats use echoes to see in the dark. Satellites also play a role in collecting gravity data. This may sound strange, but different types of rocks have slightly different weights. Heavier rocks create stronger gravitational pull, and satellites can measure those tiny differences. Another tool commonly used for these explorations is underwater sensors, which sit quietly on the seafloor and listen for natural vibrations, like mini earthquakes or shifts in rock. These vibrations help scientists figure out what the crust is made of and how thick it is. They're basically ears on the ocean floor. They also most likely used AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles, basically robot submarines that can scan the seafloor in high resolution even under thick ice. In any case, scientists are very excited because this new continent discovery is more than just a geological surprise. It's what they call a natural laboratory. The study of the microcontinent Davis Strait offers a rare opportunity to understand how microcontinents form, evolve, and sometimes fail to fully separate. It also reminds us that Earth's crust isn't as neatly divided as we once thought. Beneath the ocean, there may be other hidden landmasses near Greenland or elsewhere, almost continents just waiting to be found. This lost continent of Canada may not have made it as a fully fledged landmass, but its discovery is already reshaping how we view plate tectonics. And thanks to advances in technology, places we once ignored are now offering up secrets about the planet's deep past, and maybe even its future.
Dinosaurs, big ancient bugs, creepy spiders, and scary insects are all cute animals compared to the monsters that lived on Earth about 500 million years ago. For example, here's a creature that swam in the water like a stingray and had 3 eyes. Its mouth was like a pencil sharpener. 2 long claws with forked tips like pincers protruded from its head, and its gills were somewhere in the back. This is not a thing from a sci-fi movie. This is Mosura. Its remains are preserved in excellent condition. Let's look at it more closely and study other similar monsters. the Cambrian explosion. Remember this name. This period is also called the biological Big Bang, the time when a huge number of different living creatures began to appear in the ocean, large, small, and tiny. The ancestors of almost all modern animal groups were most likely born during the Cambrian explosion, which lasted from 541 to 485 million years ago. It was a time when the first truly effective and terrifying predators appeared on Earth. One of them was Mosura. It's only the size of an index finger, but you would never want to meet such a creature while swimming in the sea. It's scary to imagine what it could do with its pencil sharpener-shaped mouth. And you probably wouldn't be able to hide from it because, come on, it had 2 eyes on the sides and 1 big eye on its forehead. Mosura belonged to a group of arthropods. Scientists called it a sea moth since it reminded them of a moth. This thing used a flap-like apparatus similar to wings to float in the water like a stingray. This monster was quite creepy, but its appearance may seem familiar because it's a distant relative of modern spiders, crabs, centipedes, and moths. Scientists found several 506 million-year-old Mosura fossils, but unlike many other similar finds, these ones have been preserved in excellent condition. The found fossils showed sharp claws, a toothy jaw, and large gills in the tail section. Some parts of the fossil were so clear that they revealed the details of the creature's internal anatomy, including parts of its nervous and circulatory systems and digestive tract. It had jointed limbs like those of modern insects and crustaceans. When this monster swam in the sea, it probably grabbed its prey with long spiked claws sticking out of its head. Many Mosura relatives have claws covered with multiple spikes, which help them grab food. But that ancient creature had smooth claws forked at the tips. That is, it grabbed the prey with those tongs, using them like chopsticks, and then brought it to its mouth. Of course, this is an assumption, and nobody saw how this creature actually did it. Unlike many other similar animals, Mosura's posterior segmented body was studded with gills. Scientists don't know why this was necessary, but they assume that such an unusual breathing system helped to adapt to an environment with low oxygen content. Perhaps Mosura led a very active reproductive lifestyle that required high oxygen consumption. Creepy, dangerous, and reproducing fast. An excellent set of qualities for one of the most dangerous predators of antiquity. But what did Mosura eat? It probably caught different types of worms and small arthropods. It's nice to think that this monster lived so long ago and was so small. But what if this creature was the size of a shark and was swimming in the ocean these days? Perhaps it would become a dominant dweller and people would swim much less along the coast. Mosura lived in the water but was discovered in the Burgess Shale Rock Formation in the Canadian Rockies. Many mountains on Earth were once the seabed inhabited by strange creatures. One of them was Opabinia. It had 5 eyes, a mouth facing backward, a long trunk and claws instead of a nose. Wait, what? It's too strange even for science fiction, even for outer space. In its eccentricity, Opabinia was perhaps the loneliest creature on Earth. Scientists couldn't find another species that would be similar to this individual until recently. Meet Utaurora. It seems to belong to the same species as Opabinia. Its inch-long body was divided into 14 to 15 furrows. Each of them ended in a pointed flap. Opabinia had the same body, but it's unlikely that both monsters were friends. The difference between their timelines was several million years. It's hard to imagine why these monsters needed such strange body structures. Why haven't modern filmmakers used the design of those animals to create cool space monsters yet? Okay, they were creepy creatures, but what about weird and kinda useless ones? Scientists have discovered Su, a legless creature with no head turned inside out. Huh? This 444 million-year-old creature was found in South Africa, north of Cape Town. They called it Su after the discoverer's mother. In fact, it's some kind of new arthropod species that may have lived in low-oxygen waters. This creature was turned inside out, and the outer shell with the legs and head was lost. Thanks to mineralization, muscles, tendons, and even Sue's intestines were preserved on the fossil. It's a great success to find such detailed remains of an ancient creature. However, scientists still can't determine the evolutionary history of this species. They're sure that it was a primitive marine arthropod. Okay, we can see that 500 million years ago, Earth was filled with creepy monsters, which fortunately are now extinct. But what about trees? Were they the same as we see now? Or was there something else? Something creepy? Oh yeah. Scientists have discovered a new kind of living organism similar to a tree or a mushroom. It was gigantic and had a very minimalistic design. Meet the Prototaxites. It's basically just a big stick with a round end poking out of the ground. It was smooth, didn't have the usual tree bark, and looked more like a mushroom without a cap. But scientists have recently found out that it wasn't a mushroom at all. Prototaxites probably belonged to a previously unknown branch of life. Prototaxites is considered to be the first giant organism in the history of the planet that lived on land. It existed about 420 to 375 million years ago during the Devonian period. It was the time when plants began to spread across dry land, forming large forests. Over time, they began to grow leaves and form roots in the ground. Then, the first seed plants appeared. The real colonization of land began. The first arthropods, such as centipedes, arachnids, and other unpleasant creatures, began to walk among those forests. Meanwhile, the water was filled with a huge biodiversity. There was a giant supercontinent on the planet, and smaller parts began to break off it. During this period, Prototaxites towered over the land. Some of these things reached 26 feet high and 3 feet wide. It's like a 3-story house and as thick as a palm tree. But what was it? A plant? A mushroom? Algae, perhaps? Scientists discovered them in the middle of the 19th century, but only in 2007 did they conduct chemical analysis. Research showed that it was most likely a giant mushroom, but in 2025, scientists refuted this conclusion. It turns out this may have been an unknown life form that existed separately from the kingdom of fungi, animals, plants, and protists. Scientists noticed that the inner part of Prototaxites consisted of a number of tubes. There are similar tubes inside mushrooms, but the tubes of that ancient living thing branched and joined differently. They even had a different chemical composition. The main building block of mushrooms is chitin, but the Prototaxites contained chemicals similar to lignin, a substance found in the bark of trees and other plants, and its anatomy differs from the structure of any other organism known to us. What were they doing on Earth? Just chilled and enjoyed the bloom of life? Did they produce some kind of fruit, like a banana with eyes and claws? Scientists don't know. What if it was something that was brought to Earth from outer space? What if they were flowers planted by another civilization? What do you think? You certainly know the Great Wall of China. But did you know the country just built a second one? This one, though, isn't made of bricks and stones, and it doesn't keep out invaders. Instead, it's made of plants and serves as a last line of defense against something that's been slowly but relentlessly taking over the country: sand. This big barrier surrounds the tricky Taklamakan Desert, located in the northwest part of the country. This area is huge, covering an area of over 130,000 square miles, just a bit smaller than Germany. It has some massive dunes, some towering over 300 feet, which is taller than a 30-story skyscraper. The temperatures are crazy too, with scorching heat in the summer, often going up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's not just the size or the temperature that makes it so fearsome. It's the way it moves. Yep, this is the world's second largest shifting sand desert. 85% of it is made up of dunes that move as they're carried by the wind. The sand is constantly swallowing roads, villages, and farmland in its path. The more adventurous travelers who cross the desert by car or bus can actually see the sand moving across the road.
But they also noticed something interesting on the horizon: green bushes. Don't mistake it for an oasis, though. That's the new Great Wall, or rather, the Green Wall. A massive project designed to fight desertification and control dust storms. But is this really such a big deal? Absolutely. China has been battling desert expansion for quite some time, as one of the reasons is that they need more space. You see, China is one of the most populous countries in the world, second only to India. And now you might be thinking, okay, but their territory is huge, so there's plenty of space for everyone. Well, technically, yes. After all, we are talking about a country that spans over 3 million square miles, almost as big as all of Europe. Even though China is huge, not all of its land can be used. A big part of the country is covered in arid terrain, places that aren't really suitable for construction and have very few people living there. There are 12 major deserts, which make up nearly 20% of China's territory. And this problem is only getting worse as the wasteland keeps expanding. In the future, deserts could take up as much as 44% of the country. Even the capital, Beijing, is at risk. By the way, the capital is already being constantly hit by severe sandstorms, forcing residents to stay inside to avoid the heavy air pollution. For years, China's deserts have been spreading at a rate of more than 1,300 square miles a year. Take the Ningxia-Hui region in northwestern China, for example. It's surrounded by 3 major deserts and has been battling desertification for over 60 years. And as of 2010, 57% of its land had already been affected. This isn't just an inconvenience. Desertification destroys farmland, crippling food production. It also forces people to abandon their homes after watching their village get buried in sand. Authorities are working hard to relocate these people to safer areas. And for those who choose to stay, life isn't easy. Farming, for example, is becoming more and more difficult. For example, farmers in the town of Tongunawa say that when they were kids, they could dig and find water tables about 6 feet deep. Now, they have to dig about 16 feet just to reach water. And since the soil isn't as soft or fertile as it used to be, they also have to use a lot more fertilizer on their crops. Okay, but why is all of this happening? There's not just one main reason for desertification. It's more like a combination of factors. In China specifically, studies show that about 20% of the blame is due to the planet's rising temperatures. I mean, yes, deserts are already environments that are prone to drought, but the increasing heat makes the dryness even worse. And it's a fact that it rains way less nowadays than it did a half a century ago. So, this climate disruption mainly affects the northeastern and northwestern parts of China. But in areas near the Muaz Desert in north-central China, there's another factor making the country even more arid. And that's us, humans. The equation is simple: more people, more desertification. Between 1997 and 2008, China's population grew by nearly 100 million people. With more people, they need more food, more space, and more resources. So they start cutting down trees, clearing land for farming, and using up all the natural resources around them. It's like the land is just getting stripped of everything it needs to stay healthy. That's how desertification speeds up. But the desertification problem in China can actually affect your life, even if you're on the other side of the world. Here's the thing. Soil stores a huge amount of carbon. But as the land degrades, not only does it lose the ability to hold on to that carbon, it can actually release it into the atmosphere. And when more carbon goes into the air, well, we all know how that story ends, right? Luckily, there are a few ways to keep China from turning into one giant sandpit. One solution that authorities have come up with is building the green wall we've been talking about in the Taklamakan Desert. By planting a massive amount of trees, shrubs, and other vegetation around the deserts, they're able to prevent sandstorms. The thing is, the wind and sand action at the edge of the desert is super intense, and the sand dunes keep expanding outward. This green belt also helps protect infrastructure. By locking in the desert's edges, it safeguards things like railways and roads. Building such a powerful barrier is a huge engineering feat. The first challenge is obviously the size of the desert that needs to be contained. It's massive. Then there's the height of the dunes, some of which reach crazy heights. The tallest dunes are as high as a skyscraper with 100 floors. On top of that, engineers have come up with solutions to make the greenbelt thrive in the dry climate, which makes reforestation practically impossible. So this is definitely not a project that happens overnight. Just in the Taklamakan Desert alone, it took 40 years to finish the first 1,700 miles of the greenbelt. To finish the rest, they needed a group of 600,000 people planting desert-tolerant species like desert poplar, red willow, and saxaul trees. Speaking of that, even the plants they're using in the project can create economic opportunities. For example, there is the desert hyacinth, also known as the ginseng of the desert. This plant actually thrives in dry environments, and it can be easily sold since it's traditionally used in food in China. Besides the plants, they're also setting up solar power bases around the desert. Installing solar panels there doesn't just generate power, it can also help keep the sand dunes from moving. This huge man-made barrier, which stretches about 2,000 miles around the Taklamakan Desert, was finally completed in November 2024. And it looks like all the hard work from the engineers really paid off. The portion of the country covered by deserts dropped from 27.2% in the previous decade to 26.8%. That's pretty amazing. But where did all that sand go? It's not like it just vanished into thin air. It's more like it's been contained now. The sand that used to move around is not spreading anymore, at least not taking over more land. The battle against desertification is far from over, but one thing is clear. China is no longer just fighting its deserts, it's actually winning. For every 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit increase in a country's average temperature, the GDP per capita drops by at least 1.1%. To put it simply, with every step you take from the North Pole to the equator, not only do you get hotter, but you also get poorer. Even though life in freezing cold countries can seem miserable, 74.2% of the world's billionaires are concentrated in the global north. And there are at least 4 theories explaining that. The simplest theory is tied to biology. Cold weather is believed to keep germs away, leading to better health and productivity. Sounds good, but I'll challenge that later. Next, there's the sloth theory from ancient Greece, and it's more about climate in general. Greeks believed their ideal weather made them wealthier, while hotter regions were seen as less creative. The third idea is based on economic and anthropological studies. You see, experts noticed some time ago that colder countries have inclusive institutions that offer equal job and life opportunities and protect markets and private property. Naturally, such conditions promote healthy competition and boost wealth. The last idea is tightly connected to the previous one. Long story short, richer countries tend to distribute money better because they're more inclusive. Poorer nations often have extractive institutions where a powerful elite controls wealth. While all of them seem plausible, the truth is, these ideas are borderline insane. Well, you know the theory claiming that cold climates eliminates germs and the population of colder countries doesn't get so sick? I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but the cold actually makes germs thrive. In the cold, we tend to stay inside with the whole house shut, so we share germs with each other more easily. Not only that, but during winter, the air is drier, creating the perfect environment for the flu virus to flourish. Humans are also more resistant to viruses and bacteria from their own environment because the constant contact with them makes our immune system stronger. If you look back at your history classes, you might remember that most British people struggled with the weather and bacteria found in America, while Native Americans themselves were mostly fine. And what about the sloth theory? Sorry, I don't mean it to sound offensive, but some specialists, they claim that, people in hotter countries tend to be lazier. But the truth is, the sun doesn't make us work less. Yes, the sun can make you a bit slower because you can dehydrate. But you see, the human body is biologically adapted to the climate of the place they're born in. This means that if you live in Canada, for example, you can endure the cold just fine. But Brazilians will probably handle hot days better than you. But if the sloth theory was true, how would you explain that people in Colombia work about 200 hours a year more than those from the United States? In fact, if you live in Cambodia, Myanmar, or Mexico, you're bound to work more than anyone in the world. Besides, hotter countries have a genius way to fight off laziness. It's called siesta. After lunch, it's normal to feel a bit sleepy, and if you have heavier meals like the Spanish and Italians do, you'll get extra slow. This is why after lunch they usually have a siesta, also known as a quick nap, which improves your memory and thinking skills. It may sound like a siesta makes you work less, but people who nap after lunch simply work at different hours of the day. While you make shorter lunch breaks and go home at 6 p.m., in Spain, the lunch break lasts 2 hours and the workday ends at 8 p.m. They work when it's not so hot outside and even get to take a power nap. The past is also crowded with people who lived rich lives despite the scorching sun. The ancient Egypt civilization may have existed thousands of years ago, but they were one of the richest civilizations ever, even though they lived in a place that was super hot and super dry. We also have the Aztecs, who lived in Mexico back when Mexico didn't exist yet. This region is not so famous for its cold weather, I can tell you that. But the Aztec civilization still managed to have a capital that was bigger than London, Paris, and Madrid of the time. On top of that, many of the inventions we have today that make a lot of people rich were created thanks to math and science. Two things born in hot places, like Mesopotamia and India. Now, to make all those economic and anthropological studies sound simpler, let's start with the most obvious part. It's true that hotter countries usually make money out of their natural resources. They don't have such strong industries, and the money is concentrated in the hands of the elite. All of this reduces the GDP, that thing that estimates whether a country is wealthy or not. Remember we said richer countries have inclusive institutions? These institutions are basically laws that make sure people have equal job and life opportunities, including nice houses and a good salary. Poor countries are not very good at this inclusive institution thing, but it's not by choice. This is actually a consequence of the age of exploration. In case you were sleeping during your history classes, let me remind you. The age of exploration is that time between the 15th and 17th centuries, when many kingdoms in Europe were exploring the seas and setting up colonies all over the world. I know it feels like this was a long time ago, but many countries that were colonies back then only became independent during the 20th and 21st century. This is why many poor countries don't have solid industries and markets, because their institutions and laws date back to when they were still colonies, and their years as colonies depleted resources and didn't provide a good infrastructure. Besides, saying that private property reduces the income and inequality gap is kind of absurd. It's true that developing countries like Brazil and South Africa are highly unequal, but in the US, for example, 1% of the richest people in the country make 139 times more money than the poorest part of the population. And there were more than 700,000 homeless people in 2024. Besides, 1% of the world's population is wealthier than the rest of humankind put together. If inclusive institutions were really that powerful in richer countries, then there wouldn't be more than 1 billion people living in acute poverty all over the world. There's no point in saying that private property makes everyone's lives better if people can't even afford to have a house in the first place. And using the GDP to calculate the wealth of a country is not exactly the best way to understand poverty, because the GDP only considers how much money the industry itself makes. It ignores, for example, the question of whether people who work in those industries have good jobs, if they are well paid and have a good life. The GDP also ignores inequality, which means it ignores those inclusive institutions we mentioned before. In the United States, there are about 835 billionaires, but 11% of the American population is still very poor. So, my hot take here is that inclusive institutions are not that inclusive, and that money is not that well distributed in the first place. Different cultures also have different concepts of what it means to be wealthy. In London, for example, being able to afford food, clothes, and shelter does not make you rich. To them, you're simply surviving. If you want to be truly wealthy in London, you might have to hire a housekeeper, buy a horse, and have a personal Pilates instructor. But to the Awa or the Yanomami tribes, money doesn't even exist. They produce only the necessary, and if they have a surplus, they will trade with other tribes. I guess the fact that poor countries are all located closer to the equator line is not just a simple historical coincidence.
Now, when you think of Norway, things that come to mind are the sun that never sets in the summer, unbelievable nature, the fact that it's one of the happiest countries in the world, even white bears that freely roam in the wild. I'm guessing they're happy too. Already planning your trip to this dream country? Well, don't rush. You'll have to review your budget. Fuel there is 10 to 15% more expensive than in other Western European countries. A meal at a cafe for one person will cost at least $30. Plus, consider yourself lucky if you manage to find a hotel at $100 a night. If you Google the most expensive country in the world, you'll see this list. Switzerland, which is meanishly expensive. The United States, duh, been there, know that. Luxembourg is not a surprise either. And then, all of a sudden, you see Norway. Just so you know, a family of 4 would need over $4,000 a month just to exist in Norway. And it doesn't even include rent. Specialists say that Norway is around 7% more expensive than in the US. Norway is a bit weird though. Usually, the richest countries have national currencies that are stronger than the US dollar. Take Swiss francs, for example, or the Kuwaiti dinar, which is literally the boss when it comes to currencies. Like one Kuwaiti dinar can snag you $3.25 US. Now, here's where the mismatch comes. The Norwegian krone is dubbed the weakest currency in the West. Well, how come? In the wild world of global currencies, the Norwegian krone used to be a tough player known for smart money moves. But surprisingly, it is now the weakest currency in the West, taking a big hit in the last decade. It has fallen hard against the US dollar and euro, causing concern for central banks and money folks worldwide. The oil price roller coaster is a major factor in the krone's struggle, as Norway relies heavily on oil exports. But even with oil prices relatively high, it remains historically weak against major currencies. The weak Norwegian krone is affecting everyday folks too, with prices rising on almost everything due to heavy imports. Inflation is growing, leading to interest rate hikes by the Norges Bank. High interest rates are hurting the housing market and making life more expensive for Norwegian citizens. So one of the supposed reasons for why Norway is so expensive might be weak national currency. What else is particular about Norway? Well, climate for sure. It may be hard to imagine a freezingly cold country plunging into riches. It's an imagery we usually see on social media with geotags Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or even Kuwait. And it makes sense to think now that all the riches are somewhere southward, as these places have strong oil-based economies and super strong currencies. But in reality, better economies in the south are a current trend. Ever wonder why cold countries seem to be raking in the cash while the hot nations are just hanging out? Turns out, those living in chilly climates had to hustle just to survive winter. Think building shelter, stockpiling food, and keeping that fire burning. Meanwhile, those basking in the sunshine had it a little easier with hunting and foraging year-round. This theory holds true even in the land down under. Sydney and Melbourne, the top dogs in Australia's wealth game, also happen to be some of the coldest cities, while Darwin, the warmest city, is lagging behind. Some might argue that this theory doesn't hold up when we look at ancient civilizations or modern hotspots like tropical Singapore. But hey, times change, and so does wealth generation. Back in the day, it was all about farming, but now it's more about industry and innovation. So, Norway may seem to have been bound to get rich historically and geographically. Still, it's not exactly so. Norway used to struggle a lot. Back in the day, it faced some tough times with harsh winters and tricky geography. They even had famines that pushed families to seek a better life in the US. So, how did Norway go from rags to riches? Yep, oil and gas played a big role. The country is small, but it has around 0.31% of all oil reserves in the world. But in Norway, there's more to the story than just black gold. For example, the top oil reserve is not some Arabic country, but Venezuela, which claims up to 20% of the world's liquid gold. Still, Venezuelan's economy is far from stable, so it's not all about oil. Although bested in forest size by other European nations, Norway was an unrivaled powerhouse in lumber during the Age of Sail. Thanks to its strategic fjord path, timber from its inland forests could quickly reach fjord-side mills and global markets. As railroads unlocked larger forest potential in other countries post the 19th century, Norway was Europe's timber king, bolstered by a world-class merchant fleet by the 20th century. The Norwegian timber wealth, coupled with early cooperative societal norms, spurred growth across several sectors, from agriculture to fishing and banking. Despite being labeled poor in the 19th century, Norway's GDP per capita outshone Eastern and Southern European nations. The nation's ascendancy continues beyond the discovery of its oil reserves. Norway is unique, with a small population but sprawling land. Despite its vastness, the Nordics are scattered and considered one of the most spacious countries globally. Much of the North's territory stretches beyond the Arctic Circle, offering harsh landscapes with thin topsoil covering the bedrock. The tough terrain in Norway, full of mountains and with a short growing season, limits arable land to only 2.2%, similar to Yemen. The scattered arable land in small valleys makes extensive farming impractical, a far cry from the efficient farming in the US. With a huge chunk of land and coastlines, but a small population, Norway makes some serious cash from its reserves. Plus, nature has been pretty kind to Norway, with rich fishing grounds, hydropower from rivers, and power from cold waters. And only then comes the little thing called oil. The late 50s saw a big discovery that changed everything for Norway's economy. Fast forward to today, and petroleum activities have been a major game changer for Norway, feeding its economic growth and funding its welfare state. But Norway didn't just sit back and watch the money flow in. They made smart moves, like creating a sovereign wealth fund to manage their oil wealth for the long haul. The fund sees some big bucks, currently standing at 1.7 billion Norwegian kroner, or over 160 million US dollars. Norway uses the interest from this fund to boost its annual budget, ensuring top-notch healthcare, education, and welfare for its citizens. And here's the kicker: Norway's not resting on its laurels. They're investing in sustainable technologies, like offshore wind power, to secure a bright future beyond oil and gas. Now, Norway may be expensive, but it can't compete with the world's costliest place to live, Monaco. It's almost 4 times more expensive than the global average. So, if you're looking to rub elbows with the rich and famous, look no further than Monaco. With property prices soaring to an average of over $50,000 per square meter in 2022, it's no wonder why this tiny country is a magnet for the la-di-da. However, there's a place that's particularly expensive for tourists, and I'm not talking about tourist traps. Neither Oslo nor Monaco can beat the prices in, well, take a second to make your guess. Ready? Welcome to Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. A gallon of milk costs a whopping $15 US. while a standard internet subscription plan will set you back $168 a month. Calm down, you're not poor, it's just an economic glitch. The reason for these prices is simple. The Turkmen national currency exchange rate in relation to dollars is fixed and never changes. $1 equals 3.5 manats, and has been so since 2015. Local prices in the local currency grew to inflation, making it not proportionate to prices in dollars. The exchange rate never changes. So if you live there, such prices don't seem to be extraordinary. But if you come with dollars, you're in for a pricey trip.
Meet Hula Male, also known as the City of Hope. This nickname makes total sense since this artificial island is part of the Maldives' big plan to avoid being completely submerged in the near future. Hula Male was created by placing sand from the seafloor onto a submerged coral platform. And it worked! This city sits about 6 feet above sea level, which means it's twice as high as the Maldives' capital, Male. While more and more people are moving there to live, the island was also designed to serve as a temporary evacuation site during dangerous storms and typhoons. Seychelles is another gem in the Indian Ocean that's at risk of disappearing. Unfortunately, coastal flooding is becoming a common issue there, especially during spring tides and heavy rainfall. The problem is that their main island, Mahé, hosts about 90% of the country's population. Along the coast, it's only about 6 feet above sea level. Fiji is the third tropical paradise on our list, and it's also a top pick for travelers. But this nation is in a tough spot, since it's located right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where huge storms can really turn things into chaos. Take Cyclone Winston. It hit Fiji back in 2016 and ended up costing them over $1 billion in damage. So one thing they're doing to protect themselves is planting mangroves along the coast and preserving the ones that already exist. These trees are awesome since they help reduce wind speed during cyclone emergencies and also combat erosion by trapping sediments. Egypt might be in trouble too. I mean, it's not like the whole country is going to be underwater, and we'll only see the tips of the pyramids in a few years. But things could really change for them, as coastal cities are facing a serious risk. Take Alexandria, for instance. 45% of its population already lives below sea level. If the city is flooded, not only will everyone have to move, but Egypt in general will suffer a major impact on its fish production. In Europe, one of the most at-risk populations is in the Netherlands, where about half the people live in areas below sea level. In the future, planning a romantic gesture with tulips for your girlfriend could become an impossible mission. The Netherlands is responsible for 2/3 of the world's tulip production. So if fields are taken over by saltwater, it's game over for the blooms. But the good news is that the Dutch have centuries of experience dealing with water, so knowing how to work with storm barriers and seawalls can prevent them from a doomsday scenario. The risks of rising sea levels probably aren't higher anywhere else than here in Tuvalu. This island chain, located halfway between Australia and Hawaii, could be the first state to become uninhabitable. Its stunning land is only about 9 feet above sea level. And just by looking at it on the map, you can see how narrow it is. In fact, the narrowest part in Fongafale is only about 65 feet wide. So even before higher tides become a real problem, the country's limited farmland could be flooded with saltwater. The next country on our list is the Philippines. This archipelago in Southeast Asia boasts some of the most stunning scenery, but it faces the risk of flooding for 2 reasons. First, due to rising sea levels, and second, because of crazy, unpredictable weather. Since 1990, events like cyclones, earthquakes, and tsunamis have cost the country over $20 billion. Have you ever heard of Vanuatu? This chain of islands, spread out between Australia and Fiji, could be flooded soon. Vanuatu was one of the first Pacific nations to relocate an entire community to a safer spot. Back in 2005, residents living in risky coastal areas of the northern island of Tegua moved to higher ground. Next up, the Marshall Islands, a country located in the Central Pacific. Studies show that 40% of the buildings in the capital city, Majuro, could end up underwater in the future. But this country isn't throwing in the towel just yet. They've got a game plan. They are fortifying the infrastructures of their low-lying airport, relocating key buildings to higher ground, and putting up seawalls on rural islands. Heading south, we've got Nauru. This is actually one of the smallest countries in the world, covering just 8.1 square miles. Today, it's home to 10,000 people, but it's on the brink of becoming uninhabitable. Water levels are rising about 3 times faster there than the global average. The Buada Lagoon sparks special concern since it's the only surface freshwater resource, and it's located only 16 feet above sea level. Our next stop in the Pacific Ocean is the Republic of Palau. Rising sea levels are no joke for them either, but protecting their crops, especially taro, is a priority at this moment. About halfway between Hawaii and New Zealand lies Samoa, and this country is dealing with a unique situation. Not only is the volume of water increasing there, but their land is also sinking. You see, a couple of strong earthquakes and tsunamis hit Samoa back in 2009. So as the crust bounces back to its original position, the overall land surface is actually going down. Because of this, their housing and main infrastructure could take a serious hit, especially since all their airports are along the coast. Let's head to Kiribati. This Pacific nation has a big problem with frequent flooding because most of its people and infrastructure are near the coast. Apart from the volcanic island of Banaba, none of Kiribati's land is more than 6.5 feet above the ocean. To tackle this situation and keep their population safe, they had this big idea of making a massive floating platform, kind of like the ones oil companies have. But the problem is that it would cost them a fortune, as the project is estimated to be around $2 billion. If visiting Vietnam is on your bucket list, you better hurry up. The top 10 things to do there mostly involve cruising to jaw-dropping spots like down to Ha Long Bay, also known as the Descending Dragons Bay. But by 2050, the surrounding land over there might be underwater. Another huge problem Vietnam is facing is that the main rice fields are getting salty. And if you're into Vietnamese food, you know how important rice is for them. Right now, they're especially concerned about the Mekong Delta region being vulnerable. After all, this is a highly fertile area responsible for most of Vietnam's agricultural output, with over 50% of it being, rice. This nation is really putting in the effort to adjust to this new reality. They're flushing the rice fields in the Mekong Delta with fresh water to get rid of the saltiness. Our next stop is in the Caribbean Sea. Grenada is an island country, but you may know it as the Island of Spice, since its tropical climate is just perfect for cultivating things like nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. Unfortunately, Grenada and its incredible fertile soil also face an uncertain future of being submerged. Let's talk about the last country on our list, the Solomon Islands. 5 islands in this archipelago have already vanished beneath the waves, and 6 others are submerged by 20%. They include the Nusa Evili Island, which was once a hotspot to go to for a picnic in the early 2000s. Even though the situation is complicated, it's important to note that more than 300 of the islands there are inhabited. One thing about the Solomon Islands is that it seems like they're always in some kind of recovery mode, since the country often gets hit by tropical cyclones and flash floods. Their population is already working hard to save their homes from the rising seas by building stone walls along the coast, planting mangroves, and constructing houses in higher areas.
In Mongolia, dinosaurs used to live, and now there are as many horses as there are people and 10 times as many sheep there. It's the emptiest country in the world. The capital has been moved 28 times, and they even have their own Olympics. So Mongolia is located right here, on the plateau of Central Asia, right north of China. It's the 19th country in the world by land area, but it only has a bit over 3 million people. It's like the population of Los Angeles, but having a whole country to themselves, if we don't count Greenland, Mongolia is the country with the lowest population density. It has only 2 people per half a square mile. The United States has 37. Well, that is if we only count people. Mongolia has a lot of livestock, about 67 million. It's 20 times more than the number of people there. Half of that livestock is sheep. Yet of all their animals, the most prestigious one is the horse. There's a traditional saying, a Mongol without a horse is like a bird without wings, and it explains a lot. A person with many horses is considered wealthy, but don't picture huge farms with big stables filled with horses. In Mongolia, having stables is more of an exception. Horses there roam free outside all year long. It costs next to nothing to sustain a horse there because they roam outside and even find food themselves, and the country's nature provides them with enough. Winter is tough because everything is covered in snow, but horses can separate grass from snow. They get frail by spring due to a lack of food, but recover very soon after winter is over. A family can have a sacred horse in their herd. It wears a blue scarf around its neck and is almost never ridden. People there do love their horses, and this tender relationship goes centuries back. There are many songs, stories, myths, and artwork featuring horses. In the Mongolian language, there are about 500 words to describe the traits of horses, and over 200 words to describe the coat color and pattern alone. Horses have a spiritual meaning too. It's believed that they have spirits that can help the owner, and they are also believed to be a transport to heaven. So they were often sacrificed after their owner's passing. Apart from domestic animals, the country is home to some endangered species. Plus, back in the day, dinosaurs roamed the land. The first ever discovered dinosaur egg was found right there. Today, dinosaurs are, of course, extinct, except in the movies. But there are snow leopards in Mongolia, and those are also rare. If you ever do go to this country, you must be careful. Snow leopards are so quiet, you won't hear them approaching you. They make no sound as they walk. But let's get back to geography. The climate in Mongolia can be harsh and unpredictable. Within just one day, the temperature can change by 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The country doesn't have any access to large bodies of water. That's why it's very dry and doesn't get much rain. In the south of Mongolia, there is a part of one of the coldest deserts on Earth, the Gobi Desert. Only 5% of the desert is covered in sand. The rest is bare rock. It has rivers, small lakes, and grasslands, but also gold, coal, and copper. So it's not a very typical desert, but still a desert. Rain clouds don't reach there because of the Himalayan range that keeps the area in the shadow. The desert is expanding every year, because of climate change, of course, but also because of deforestation and changes in land use. The whole country is quite dry with little precipitation, and that's why the inhabitants aren't afraid of the desert. Yes, the desert is populated. There are people living there. They're nomads who are busy with raising cattle. Nomads are people who don't have a settled home. They travel with their animals from place to place following the seasons. When they settle somewhere before their next trip, they set up a tent that is called a yurt. These have been homes in Mongolia for thousands of years, and it's amazing that some people still live in them. The skeleton of a yurt is made of poles, which are then covered with layers of felt and waterproof fabric. The Mongols are a very welcoming nation overall, but the nomads are on a whole other level. They don't get guests often, and they're always ready to greet someone and give them a taste of traditional horse milk. They don't even have bells at the entrance of their yurts, inviting guests to walk right in. Of course, there are also people who live in cities and villages and have settled homes, and they are the majority, about 3/4 of the population. The biggest city in the country is the capital, Ulaanbaatar. Almost half of the country's population is concentrated there in just one city, even though it's the coldest capital city in the world. The average yearly temperature there is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The average temperature in Washington, D.C. is 60 degrees, and it's 44 in Ottawa. When the city was first founded in the 17th century, it was located about 180 miles southwest of the current place. Then it was moved a little bit 28 times until it finally settled in the current location. Why? Well, back then, most of the population were nomads. so the capital city was a mobile settlement too. Depending on seasons, pastures, water supplies, and many other factors, it moved along with its inhabitants. Now the city is big and settled, so maybe it won't be moved again. But who knows? I know, I have yet to tell you about the Mongolian Olympic Games. The event is called Nadam Festival. It's an annual festival held in the middle of summer that most Mongolians watch. In one form or another, the festival has existed for centuries. Locally, the festival is called the Three Games of Men, and people compete in 3 skills that have traditionally been considered 3 manly skills. So, what are those 3 games? It's Mongolian wrestling, horse racing, and archery. Originally, it was just men competing, but recently women have started participating in archery and horse racing. Mongolian wrestling is a folk wrestling style that's been around for thousands of years. The depictions of it can be seen on many ancient plates found in the area. Today, it's the most popular sport in the country, and Mongolia hosts many international tournaments too. So, of course, there is a wrestling part at the festival, and it's the first game. The rules are quite simple. Whoever touches the ground with anything other than a foot loses. There are no weight classes, no age or time limits, so it takes as long as it needs to win. And yet, they do it with grace. Match courtesy is important. For example, if an opponent's clothes get tangled, the other one is supposed to stop and help solve the issue, even if it means missing a good opportunity to win. At the end of the match, when one participant is defeated, the winner will give them a hand and help them back up on their feet. The game starts with either 512 or 1,024 participants who wrestle in pairs. Every loser is eliminated. The game goes on for 9 or 10 rounds, depending on the initial number of participants, until there is a winner. Then there's horse racing. This is a cross-country long-distance event, between 10 to 17 miles, depending on the age of the horse. Up to 1,000 horses from all over Mongolia can participate in the competition. Then, in archery, people compete in teams of 10. Each archer wears traditional clothes and has 4 arrows to shoot into a wall of woven or wooden cylinders. Knock one out of the wall and you get points, and the team that gets the most points wins. Hi there, traveler. Are you ready for 80 days around the world? Can't take that much time off? Well, how about 8 minutes around the world? But this is no ordinary tour. You're about to hear some weird and extraordinary stuff about different countries. So, when you visit them for real, you can brag about your cultural knowledge to your friends and even pretend to be a local. Let's kick off, pun intended since its nickname is the Boot, with Italy, shall we? Italian police sure know how to be on duty in style. Not so many years ago, a Lamborghini was added to the police vehicle fleet in Italy. It probably helps them catch criminals fast. Or maybe the lawbreakers thereafter get so impressed by how glamorous the police car is that they stop to take a look at it for a second, and that's how the officers easily catch them. Now, since we're already in Europe, we might as well head to Germany. The speed limit is nothing but a suggestion on some parts of the German highways, called the Autobahn. And it's actually up to drivers to choose whether to follow them or not. So that means they can drive as fast as they want or as fast as their car allows. You might be aware that Slovakia is famous for its many castles and chateaus, but I bet you didn't know this one strange holiday tradition they do there. A live carp is usually kept in the bathroom before preparing it for holiday dinner. Since carps are bottom feeders, people let the one they have swim in their bathtubs for a few days to clean its track. That also means no long baths with luxury salts and flower leaves. After the dinner is served, they keep a scale from the fish in their wallet because they believe it attracts money. And apparently the same goes for Poland too. There's something fishy going on. Let's head to Finland now. I have not one but 2 interesting facts about there. From 1999 to 2010, Finland held the World Sauna Competition, in which the person who could sit in the sauna the longest would win, or beg. These were so famous that people from all over the world would come to Finland to compete in this extreme activity. When you think about the fact that saunas were invented by the Finns over 2,000 years ago as a form of a bath, it makes sense that something like this became a thing. Funny thing is, the second bizarre Finland fact I have for you is also about a form of competition. See, there's this contest that originated in Finland called Jukonkanto, in which men participate in running a specific distance while carrying their wives. It even has a category in the Guinness World Records. The goal of this race for the contestants is to carry their partners through special obstacle tracks in the fastest time. Now, in case you're wondering, the original course consisted of rough, rocky terrains with fences and brooks back then, but it has been altered since to suit modern conditions. The International Wife Carrying Competition Rules Committee, yes, that's a real thing, set the rules for the track to have 2 dry obstacles and a water obstacle about 1 meter deep. The Wife Carrying World Championships have been held annually in Finland since 1992, and the winner gets their partner's weight in drinks, not gold. Talk about competitive spirit, huh? Meanwhile, Sweden, Finland's neighbor, is no slouch when it comes to having some bizarre facts of its own. If you're one of those people who is not a fan of sushi, you sure are not going to like this one. In Sweden, rotten fish is an actual food item called surströmming. Okay, to be fair, it's not really rotten. It's just lightly salted and fermented. However, it does smell rotten indeed. This version of Baltic sea herring has been a staple of Swedish cuisine since the 16th century. The fermentation process of the fish takes at least 6 months and gives the dish a somewhat acidic taste and a characteristic strong smell. So much so that it's now known as one of the world's smelliest foods. Now, might as well visit Harry Potter's motherland before we leave Europe. Now, I'm not going to say people in the UK go to school on flying brooms or anything, even though we probably all wish that was possible. But trust me, this one is as unusual as that. People in the UK have a competition to roll after a giant cheese wheel. Yup, you heard that right. The event is called the Cooper's Hill Cheese Rolling and Wake and is held every year near Gloucester in England. A round of double Gloucester cheese is sent rolling down a 200-yard hill, and participants race down after it. The competition was traditionally held by and for the people who live in the local village of Brockwood. But now they accept people from all over the world to take part in it. So write your name down for next year, and you might just win the prize, which is, what do you think, bad-smelling fish? No, it's cheese, of course. We're going to travel slightly east now and visit Turkey. If you're one of those people who calls themselves a gourmet, then this sure is going to interest you. There's a dessert in Turkey that contains chicken meat. It's a traditional dessert that's a Turkish version of a milk pudding made with shredded chicken breast. It used to be a delicacy served to Ottoman sultans in the Topkapi Palace, but it can now be found in almost every restaurant and is a very beloved dish. Now, we can't have a work tour without visiting Asia. Our first destination there is Japan. Now, if you ever have to drive a car in Japan, this sure is going to help you not get confused. Traffic lights there have a blue go light instead of the standard green. It has nothing to do with Japan's color of choice or anything, but it's all due to the Japanese language and the fact that there used to be one word to describe both blue and green. Although the International Convention on Traffic Light Colors dictates the regular red, yellow, and green, Japan is not among the countries which signed it. Yet again, in 1973, Japanese officials declared that the traffic lights should be the bluest shade of green possible to avoid any further confusion. Now it's time to head to Singapore. When you're walking down the streets of Singapore, don't be surprised to see bamboo poles sticking out of the apartment windows. Bamboo is a widely available material there, and it has a higher weight-to-strength ratio than steel. That's why people use them to dry their laundry there, and they say it actually helps clothes to dry faster. Oh, one more thing. Did you know that in Singapore, selling chewing gum has been illegal since 1992? But don't get me wrong, chewing gum is not banned. only importing and selling it is banned. So that's why you'll rarely see someone chewing gum on the street. However, there's an exception to this. It is still allowed to sell therapeutic and dental gums, and these can only be bought from a doctor or a pharmacist. Now, when you think about fun activities, nothing beats a good old-fashioned water fight, right? Well, every April during Songkran, the Thai New Year's national holiday, Thailand holds a water festival. Major streets are closed to traffic and are used as arenas for water fights. People of all ages participate in the tradition and consider this a part of ritual cleansing during the celebration period. Meanwhile, New Zealand, the real-life Middle-earth, is our next destination. What do you think? This is not what you get when a chimp sits down at a keyboard. This is an actual word, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce because my tongue and teeth would fall out just attempting it. But it's the name of a real place in New Zealand, and it's actually known as the longest place name in the world with all of its 85 characters. The name is of Maori origin, and it's shortened to Taumata to make things easy for everyone, especially the tourists. And in case you're wondering what the word means, it's this. The summit where Tamatea, the man with the big knees, the slider, climber of mountains, the land swallower who traveled about, played his flute to his loved one. Okay, things must have been pretty slow back then, when tooting a flute gets a town named after you. But who am I to judge?
Let me continue my world tour, and now we're heading straight to Europe. Let's start our journey in Greece, a place with thousands of years of history. Even in modern days, there are still ancient ruins there that are being carefully preserved, and it's an interesting ride. The airport of Athens has a built-in museum with ancient artifacts. And here's how ancient and modern coexist there. Here's the view of the Acropolis from the street. A Spartan roaming the streets of Greece. A Redditor shared a photo of a modern building built right over the ancient ruins. The visitors can see the ruins through the glass. Greece is also very well known for its cats roaming the streets everywhere. This Redditor spotted a cat guarding the National Bank of Greece. These days, everyone is trying to reduce the usage of plastic. Some use paper straws and some go with glass straws. But this cafe in Greece offered to use macaroni as straws. I'm not sure if it's stupid or genius. Another user went to a restaurant in North Macedonia and got baffled when they served slices of pizza on waffles. Double win, a snack and no waste. In Romania, vending machines seem to be a thing. This one, for example, is a machine with ham. And here's a better one, a vending machine selling cartons of eggs. Scrambled eggs, probably. Europe is a place where old neighbors are modern, and this combination is mesmerizing. I'll show you. This Redditor shared a photo of a modern basketball court squeezed between 700-year-old walls in Croatia. And here's a photo from inside a grocery store. Look at these old columns. Modern problems require modern solutions. These traffic lights light up the ground so that people who store their phones could notice when the light changes. Italy is a work of art with thousands of years of history. I have quite a bunch of stuff for you from there. Some ruins date back thousands of years, and a lot of that gets preserved. A Redditor shared a photo of a lobby of a hotel that has a glass floor so that the ruins were visible. And these are the railing in an Airbnb. Even street signs are a work of art in Italy. Look at this one. Another Redditor shared even more designs. This Redditor showed a photo of a supermarket that is located in an old theater in Venice. Another user added one more photo of that supermarket. Since we're talking about supermarkets, apparently, pets are allowed there. There are even special carts to carry them. Cities are centuries old, and there are quite a few narrow streets, so post vehicles have to adjust to fit them. Here's one of them. Some cities have canals or are located on islands, so boats are a thing. This is a UPS boat at Murano Island. Europe is packed with countries. The city of Basel in Switzerland is located right on the border with France and Germany, So the airport has 3 exits. You can walk out of it to France, Germany, or Switzerland. Let's walk out in Germany. Look, there's a traffic light with a girl walking a camel. The reasons are a mystery to me because camels aren't really a German thing, but it's cute. Here's another unique streetlight featuring Karl Marx, a famous German philosopher. Back to baffling vending machines. In Germany, you can find vending machines with sausages. Hamburg is Germany's major port city. There's a river that connects it to the North Sea. No wonder there's a drive-through McDonald's for a boat. Look at this design of mineral water that is being sold in the Swiss Alps. A Redditor brought a souvenir from France. These are baguette-shaped pens. Look at this narrow house in Spain. I wonder what it looks like inside, but unfortunately, the Redditor only shared the exterior. In Portugal, cell phone towers are disguised as trees. And this is a bus that can ride the roads and then turn into a boat. A Redditor spotted doors in London that have doorknobs in the center. This seems super inconvenient, but apparently the handle doesn't turn and exists only to pull the door closed. And the metal part with the keyhole has a little handle on the bottom of it. Europe is a historical place. This post box bears the mark of a king ruling over a century ago. Back in the day, red telephone boxes were in high demand. Nowadays, when every person has a cell phone or 2, not so much. So telephone boxes are being used in different ways. This one, for example, is now a smartphone repair shop. Luxembourg is a small but rich country squeezed between France, Germany, and Belgium, and they have baguette vending machines. Let's move north first, to the Netherlands. Farmers border their fields with a strip of flowers and put up a sign with a QR code, where people can pay for picking the flowers. And here's just a weird installation spotted by some Redditor. In Denmark, in Aarhus, a city founded by the Vikings in the 8th century, you can find traffic lights with Vikings pictured on them. Some trash cans in Swedish subways have a separate space for cans. Homeless people can pick them up and exchange the cans for some cash. There's a giant statue of a silver moose in Norway. And these are signs on bathroom stalls depicting reindeer. Apparently, Finnish people are as polite as Canadians. On the bus, they have a button to thank the bus driver. Also, a Redditor spotted a raccoon pattern on a bus seat. We all know rocking horses. Most of you probably had one in your early days. Well, Finnish little people have rocking moose. Many people come to Iceland hoping to see the Northern Lights. A Redditor had a phone in the hotel which had a special button to wake the guest up when the Northern Lights appear. Lithuanians sometimes put fake police cars on the sides of the road to combat road speeding. Europe has been ruled by kings and queens for centuries. Even today, many countries like the UK, the Netherlands, Spain, Denmark, Belgium, and some other countries have monarchs. So, no wonder that there are hundreds of castles scattered across Europe. Poland doesn't have any monarchs these days, but it still has 500 castles. Here's a warning sign for ghosts next to one of them. In Wrocław, all landmarks have a model so that visually impaired people could touch and see them too. There's also a statue of Darth Vader in one Polish city. In reality, it's a statue of a Polish magnate who supervised the construction of a port. But from time to time, locals dress the statue in Lord Vader's costume. This sign in Poland specifically prohibits bikes, tractors, and horses to go on a highway. In some places, there's a separate line on the sidewalk for people who are walking and staring at their phones. And now we travel across the Atlantic to Africa. This is Dune 7 in Namibia, the 7th biggest dune in the world. It's as tall as the Empire State Building. An internet user shared this photo. Someone in Tanzania put a literal penthouse on top of the building. I did some research and found out that it's a hotel. Still doesn't explain the roof, but I'm totally buying it. Maybe it's marketing. Drivers in Mozambique should be careful and watch out for elephants. And this is a sign from South Africa. Watch out for penguins. and another one that asks to baboon-proof the trash bins. So baboons are the raccoons of South Africa. Trees growing through the roads aren't surprising anymore, but this is a palm tree in Morocco growing through multiple balconies. A Redditor shared a photo of a runaway horse in Israel returning to the backyard in an urban area. Urban horse encounters are relatively common in the country. A hotel in Turkey served a whole honeycomb for breakfast to this Redditor.
When you first see this creature, it may seem to you that this is a flying sapphire. The blue-banded bee is as beautiful as this gem. These flying beetles have turquoise stripes instead of yellow. Their huge green eyes resemble emeralds. And their thin brown wings look like layers of cellophane with engraved patterns. Appearance is not the only thing that distinguishes them from ordinary bees. The blue-banded ones are singles. They don't move in swarms and don't live in large nests. These beetles like settling in small burrows in the soil or crevices in rocks. Another cool difference between our blue guys and ordinary bees is their unique way of pollination. Scientists call it buzz pollination. The blue bee sits on the flower, holds it tightly, and begins to shake the whole body. It creates a series of small, fast vibrations. This way, the bee also shakes the flower, quickly and gently. These movements make the pollen move out of the anther. Then the bee stops and collects all this pollen. Some scientists think these bees prefer pollinating purple flowers. This helps the blue bees blend in with the plant and remain unnoticed by enemies. But this theory hasn't been proved yet. The blue-banded bees mainly inhabit the territory of Australia. They are an important element in the agriculture of this country. These bees work with tomatoes, cranberries, eggplants, blueberries, kiwi, and chili peppers. Ordinary bees can't pollinate most of those plants, but their blue relatives can. On a global scale, more than 8% of plants in the world need to be pollinated through buzz pollination. That's why farmers love and protect blue-banded bees so much. Wasps and bees are very similar in appearance. Sometimes they can be difficult to tell apart, but their lifestyle is totally different. Bees are quiet beetles that spend all their time pollinating plants, collecting nectar from flowers, and making honey. We can say that bees are small, powerful trucks, but wasps are racing supercars. They are more aggressive, much faster, and more maneuverable in the air. Their stings are more painful. Yes, they can also carry pollen from one plant to another and feed on nectar, but their main mission is to control the population of insect pests, such as aphids and some species of caterpillars. According to some estimates, wasps manage to get rid of more than 14,000 tons of insects in the UK alone during one summer. Imagine how much they do all over the world. Wasps are dangerous beetles, but among them, there is one kind that is distinguished by its peaceful nature and lifestyle. This is the mud dauber wasp. It also has a black and yellow coloring, but it looks more elegant. A swarm of regular wasps is controlled by the queen, but mud daubers are solitary creatures. They build a small nest of mud in which they live with their children. A mud dauber will bite only if it's in danger. Unlike other wasps, these insects only use their venom to paralyze spiders, flies, and caterpillars. Then, they bring them to their nest to feed their children. So don't be surprised if you see a large horde of paralyzed spiders inside the nest. There can be more than 500 bugs in one nest. When little wasps hatch from eggs, they immediately begin their feast. The most unfriendly wasp species is the hornet. They are also wasps, but bigger, angrier, and with an even more painful bite. Its bite is one of the most dangerous among all insects. This critter can grow to be the size of a thumb. That's 3 times as large as a regular bee. Hornets attack in a huge swarm and pose a great danger to any animal. To fight them, people wear thick protective suits that resemble spacesuits. But the worst thing is that hornets invade hives and reduce the bee population. This can lead to a catastrophe on a planetary scale, since bees pollinate more than half of all fruits, vegetables, grains, and nuts in the world. Look at this big buzzing bumblebee. There's something wrong with it. It lands on a flower. And wait a minute, this is not a bumblebee at all. It's some kind of green-orange beautiful beetle. Oh, now it takes off and looks like a bumblebee again. Meet the pellucid hawk moth. Thanks to its color and transparent wings, it creates the illusion of a bumblebee. The wings of most insects serve for thermoregulation. They warm their body. Other insects have wings that help them fight enemies. A butterfly manages to look like a large creature, thanks to the pattern on its wings. Some insects communicate using vibrations created by their wings. Colored wings have many different purposes, but the pellucid hawk moth has transparent wings, and their main function is to avoid reflecting sunlight. These fast-moving transparent wings practically don't shine in the light and tone down the color of the beetle. Thanks to this, when the moth is flying, other insects perceive it as a bumblebee and are afraid to attack it. These bumblebee copycats are found in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Australia. At the beginning of life, they are bright green caterpillars that feed on coffee and pomegranate leaves. From afar, it may seem that a hamster is sitting on the trunk of a tree, but this is actually the southern flannel moth. It's large and covered with thick fur. Don't try and pet it if you don't want to go to a hospital. There are many poisonous thorns hidden inside this fur coat. Even a light prick can make you experience lots of unpleasant sensations. Other insects that pretend to be bees and wasps are hoverflies. They look like wasps, fly like wasps, and imitate a wasp's sting. But their coolest ability is copying bee buzzing. In reality, though, hoverflies are fragile, harmless creatures. Their ability to transform into bees is essential for their survival, and it works great. Many animals and insects are afraid to approach these skillful actors. But in the entire animal world, lyrebirds get the title of the most talented imitators. These small birds, with large, beautiful tails resembling a lyre, live in Australia. Imagine getting lost in a forest far away from a big city. Suddenly, you hear the sound of a chainsaw. You don't see people, but the sound is getting closer. Then you hear the clicking of a camera shutter, but there are no people with cameras around. Lyrebirds create all these sounds. Thanks to all the complex muscles of their syrinx, they can mimic the sound of almost anything. Some people heard these birds imitating human speech. Also, they are good forest designers. Female lyrebirds build domed nests on the ground, in stumps and caves. They usually lay one egg there and take care of the baby for the first 6 to 10 weeks. Let's go down from the sky to the ocean to see other tiny creatures. Meet blue-ringed octopus. This little guy looks so small and cute. Its bright neon color and blue rings are visible from afar. The octopus can easily fit in your palm, but it's better not to touch it. Meeting a great white shark may not be as dangerous as encountering this tiny creature. It's one of the most treacherous sea inhabitants in the world because of its venom. One bite can knock down a huge African elephant. The octopus is much more dangerous than a king cobra or a black widow spider because its bite often goes unnoticed. You may not feel or see when it stings you, and when you realize that something is wrong, it may be too late. Also, there's no antidote to the blue-ringed octopus's venom. The creature's salivary glands are home to bacteria that produce this venom. The same substance is found in the venom of pufferfish. When it enters the human body, it paralyzes the entire nervous system. The lungs stop contracting to supply the body with oxygen. The only good news is that this octopus is unlikely to attack first. The last recorded case when this creature charged at people was in the 60s. The blue-ringed octopus lives in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, from the coast of Japan to Australia. They spend most of their time in tide pools and coral reefs. Now we move to the hot sands of the southeastern U.S. states. You can find fire ants here. Outwardly, they don't differ much from regular bugs. But people call them fire ants because of their bite. Their poison resembles a flame. You're likely to feel the bite site burning. Therefore, it's better not to touch them and go away before any of these ants crawl into your pants.
300,000 people and over 80,000 horses. Yep, that's Iceland. The breed they have there is very specific, hardy, long-lived, and because of it, internationally popular. These horses can be found in North America and Europe too, but they can have certain features people from Iceland don't want their breed to have. Because of that, the Icelanders wanted to avoid mixing their horses with other breeds, so they passed a law over 1,000 years ago that said no horse imports. That's right, even if they give you some of their own horses, you can't take them back. No chewing gum in Singapore. Vandals used to stick their chewing gum on door sensors or would find some other way to mess with public transportation, so the country had to spend around $150,000 annually to clean that. It was easier to ban it by law, so no gum can be bought, sold, or blown into bubbles over there. Not a good idea to import them either. Going to Greece? Good. Have a safe trip. And pick the right shoes. Ever since 2009, no high heels are allowed at the Acropolis. Not that Greeks have anything against stilettos, but they simply wanted to protect their ancient ruins from damage those pointy things can cause. That, and the fact that it's not really practical for such terrain anyway. In the Italian city of Milan, it's illegal to frown in public. Or at least it was a couple of centuries ago. Through difficult historical times, Milan had to create a way to stand out, which is why there was a law requiring people to smile and generally be in a good mood in public places. Germany has highways where you can drive over 100 miles per hour. But if you get crazy with speed and run out of gas while still on a highway, you'll pay a nice fine for that. Are you 1 to 2 miles away from the gas station and want to get there on foot? Better not. That's another fine. Germans make it your responsibility for filling your car. And walking along the highway is not that safe, as is leaving your car on the side of the road. A Winnie the Pooh t-shirt. That brings back some good old memories. Well, memories are sometimes better left at home. Since Winnie doesn't wear pants, Poland decided to ban this character, so you can't have it on your clothes, around schools or playgrounds, no matter what age you are. Just in case you ever wake up and decide it's time to do some hiking in Switzerland without your clothes on, don't. For some unknown reason, some travelers made this type of hiking a thing in Switzerland a couple of years ago. So Swiss officials kindly ask you to keep your clothes on. Greetings from New Zealand. If you want to spend your Sunday afternoon flying with a rooster in a hot air balloon, you might have to find another country to do it, because here, it's illegal. Sorry. Staying in their neighborhood, in 1966, there was a law that prevented you from flying a kite in Australia in a public space if that bothered other people. Luckily, 1966 was a long time ago, so no one will remember this if you decide to have some flying kite fun in a park. Hopefully. While you're there, you can't tie your goat to your vehicle. Also, no dressing as Batman and Robin. You don't want to prove to law enforcement you're not actual vigilantes, right? In some cities, taxi drivers must have a bale of hay in their trunks at all times. At least, they had to until 1980. This law came from the olden days, when horses were still all the rage. And you can't just fill a horse with fuel now, can you? Moving to the United States now. If you're in Washington, don't even think about going after Bigfoot. They passed a law in 1969 where Bigfoot was proclaimed to be an endangered species. So, they didn't say anything about the Yeti though. In Vermont, there used to be a rule prohibiting clotheslines, as some people voted against unsightliness of others' linen and underwear hanging in everyone's view. That's why they made a new regulation. You can't forbid people to put up clotheslines. One rule against another. Yep, that should work. Shh, can you hear that? Someone's talking behind this door. Oh, I wonder what they're saying. Stop right there. At least if you're in Oklahoma. The law says you can't secretly wander around and accidentally overhear someone's conversation and then repeat or publish it later. So if you have anything to share, go tell it to the people of Oklahoma. Your secret is safe there. If you ever take a walk in Nevada and then decide to lay down on the sidewalk and take some rest, think twice, since that's illegal there. Don't sit either. You won't get away with it. Nuances, you know. If you're from Baltimore, Maryland, remember not to bring your lion to the movies. I know the big cat wanted to see it badly, but rules are rules. Also, while you're there, remember a couple of more things you shouldn't violate. No saying bad words in public places. No eating while swimming in the ocean. And no sleeveless shirts in public parks. You shouldn't throw bricks onto a highway in Iowa, unless you get written permission from the city council. Well, when you think about it, it's fair enough. If you don't feel like looking at large shiny billboards all over the city, go to Hawaii, since they banned those in 1920. Well, definitely not the only reason to visit Hawaii, but it's good to know. Meanwhile, other states like Vermont and Maine followed suit and are proud of it. One town in Georgia takes eating fried chicken very seriously. No fork, you eat it with your hands. In fact, in 2009, a woman who celebrated her 91st birthday in a restaurant was eating chicken with a fork when the police came and told her she was under arrest. The lady was later pardoned, but careful how you eat your chicken in Georgia. What else is there to say? Speaking of which, do you know why the chicken crossed the road? Not sure, but what I do know is that these jokes certainly weren't made up in Georgia, since there, it's illegal for a chicken to do just that. You think silly string is fun? Well, a town in Alabama doesn't agree on that, because it says a firm no to keeping, using, storing, selling, manufacturing, or giving away any kind of snap pops, spray string, or similar substances. Yikes. Also, when you're there, don't drive blindfolded. It's been passed as a law, which means they take the phrase, keep your eyes on the road, quite seriously. Okay, enough is enough. No more sleeping in a bathtub, donkey. Something people in Arizona must say to avoid breaking a law. In the 1920s, local people could see a rancher's donkey in a bathtub carried by a flood. The flood was caused because a local dam broke, and the tub was abandoned in the rancher's backyard. The donkey simply decided to take a nap in it. And you know how it goes. Long day, warm afternoon, post-lunch rest, just couldn't help it. After they managed to save the animal from the sailing tub, the town decided to prohibit donkeys from sleeping in a tub. You know, just in case. In Connecticut, a pickle must bounce in order for it to be considered a pickle. In the 1940s, 2 men were even arrested for selling pickles that weren't legitimate because they didn't bounce. Now, the question is, how exactly does a pickle bounce? More from the Meanwhile in Connecticut episode. It's illegal to cross a street while walking on your hands. Oh man, that's one of the hardest ones not to break. Your best friend is having a birthday. What could you give her? A spa day voucher? Tickets to Disneyland? Dinner at a fancy restaurant? A rat? Well, unfortunately, a rat is out of the legal game if you're in Montana. Well, you've got to respect the law. Luckily, if you're from Florida, rats are a completely fine gift. At least, way better than some bigger animals. Because while you're there, you need to pay parking fees for them. Camels, elephants, horses, and the rest of the animal crew. Sorry guys, you gotta respect the rules.
In India, some people have tasty chickpea and tomato curry for breakfast. It's also accompanied by puri, deep-fried flat bread. Try to say that fast. It's hollow in the middle and gets puffed up with steam when it's heated up. Some South Africans eat putu pap for breakfast. It's a sort of oatmeal, but it's made from maize and water. This dish can be eaten throughout the day, but if you're having it for breakfast, it's paired with milk and sugar. Senegalese coffee is nothing like a tall Americano. The powder they use to brew this drink is made from coffee beans, grains of saline pepper, and cloves. It's way spicier than the good old pumpkin spice latte and gives you way more energy. Over in Morocco, people prefer drinking mint tea. For breakfast, they grab a couple of freshly cooked flatbreads. They're layered and can be served with jam or honey, but sometimes you can find one stuffed with veggies or even meat. The chickpea soup called lablani is a typical breakfast dish in Tunisia. It can be pretty spicy thanks to all the onion, cumin, and herbs they cook it with. You might get a poached egg on the side, if you're lucky. In Nigeria and some neighboring countries, people have fried bean cakes for breakfast. The main ingredients are black-eyed peas spiced up with dried chili, fresh onions, and fresh red chili pepper. These cakes are deep-fried and are a popular street food. Korean breakfasts are usually pretty filling. They're made up of many banchan, which are basically side dishes. There's kimchi, a sort of fermented cabbage, a rolled omelet, marinated veggies, and jun, a sort of pancake. Wow! A Japanese breakfast can seem a bit more like lunch or dinner in other countries. You know, soup, rice, salmon, even pickled veggies. In Jamaica, people eat saltfish and ackee for breakfast. Ackee is an exotic fruit similar to lychee with a soft and creamy texture. One more tiny detail, it's kind of illegal in the US. It's mostly because the seeds are toxic, but you can eat the flesh safely as long as it's fully ripe. Better know the difference. Maybe the world's craziest breakfast sandwich ever comes from the Netherlands. They have sandwiches with candy sprinkles on them. Right, it's just sprinkles on top of buttered bread. Hagelslag, as it's called, means hailstorm, and it comes in various flavors: chocolate, vanilla, and fruit. A German breakfast might seem kinda heavy if you're used to just having a bowl of oatmeal. We're talking bread rolls, an assortment of cheeses and meats, and if need be, they can top it off with an egg or two. Coffee is the drink of choice to wash down this hearty meal. Oatmeal lovers, head to Finland. The traditional breakfast of this wonderful country consists of oatmeal they call puuru. It's served with fresh or sometimes frozen berries, sugar, and milk. The Italian breakfast is definitely not the main meal of the day. They might grab a cornetto, which is basically a croissant, maybe with a sweet filling, and a cappuccino. By the way, Italians usually only drink cappuccinos in the morning. And if you ever order a latte in Italy, you'll get a glass of milk. What we call latte in English is a cafe latte in Italy. Muesli is enjoyed all over the world, but especially in Switzerland. A typical breakfast muesli consists of oat flakes, raisins, dried fruits, nuts, usually mixed together with yogurt. In Sweden, people eat typical breakfast sandwiches called smörgås. It's a generously buttered slice of bread with some sort of topping. It can be ham, fish, or cheese, and it usually has some cucumbers, lettuce, or tomatoes thrown on there. Many people like it with hard-boiled eggs. People in Sweden are crazy about filter coffee. It tastes so good. The French breakfast is perfect for bread lovers. They have a full range of yummy breads and buns, and yup, they got that croissant thing that most people can't pronounce right. Hey, did I nail it? Maybe put a little French honk on it. Croissant. Get yourself some plain bread and some butter and jam on top, or opt for pain au chocolat. The most common drink is coffee, but many people prefer juice instead. An Argentinian breakfast can be similar to the French one. They have pastries and coffee for breakfast too. Medialunas, which is half moon in English, look a whole lot like croissants. They're just a bit smaller and sweeter. If you're not a fan of sweet pastries, grab a piece of toast called a tostada. And if coffee isn't your thing, just have a glass of orange juice. Yogurt, cereals, and eggs are mostly reserved for tourists. If you ever want to try a traditional Mexican breakfast, cook chilaquiles. Cut a bunch of corn tortillas into pieces and simmer them in salsa. The tortillas get a bit soft. Next, add some fixins: avocado, soft cheese, even chicken. Put some rice and beans on the side, and buen provecho. Want something lighter? Mexico has awesome pastries. There's one that's shaped like a shell, and one that looks like two ears stuck together. A Peruvian breakfast looks really exotic for those who've never been there. One of the traditional dishes is tacacho con cecina. Hope I got that right. It's basically roasted plantain with bits of pork. It's a popular type of street food, too. The two most important things for a Brazilian breakfast are bread and, not exactly a toughie, coffee. The favorite kind of bread for many Brazilians is the French roll, which should be generously buttered before eating and might be followed by a few cold cuts. Tropical fruits like papaya aren't exotic at all in Brazil, so don't be surprised to see them on your table when you travel to Rio. Colombians have dozens of cool breakfast recipes. In Bogota, the capital, you can find changua, which is egg and milk soup with cilantro and stale bread softened in the broth. Another hearty dish is a calentando, made of reheated rice or bean leftovers, served with sausages, avocado, and eggs. In Costa Rica, people usually eat rice and beans for breakfast too. Surprise, surprise! Unlike in Colombia, Costa Ricans grill plantains. They're like bananas but a lot less sweet, instead of sausages. Drinks are simple: coffee or juice. Getting hungry yet? One more country where rice for breakfast is super common is Malaysia. The way they make it is really cool though. It's cooked in coconut milk and served with a variety of side dishes. It can be a boiled egg, a cucumber, anchovies, or even peanuts. Eggs in the form of an omelet and cake filling, deep-fried dough sticks softened in warm soy milk, twisted pancakes stuffed with veggies. If any of that sounds yummy to you, you should try a Taiwanese breakfast at least once. Wash it down with a variety of warm soy milks. There's plain or black, which is milk seasoned with sesame powder and peanuts. A Hong Kong breakfast wouldn't be complete without its very own milk tea. It's all about the technique they use to brew it. The sock-looking cloth that filters it is really thick. When the black tea finally comes out the other end, don't forget to add some evaporated milk and sugar to get that authentic creamy flavor. Now, don't get this one wrong. If you see sausages, eggs, and roasted meat for breakfast, it doesn't mean it's an English breakfast. Take a closer look. See that rice? Sweet bacon marinated in brown sugar and soy sauce, and a cup of hot chocolate. Welcome to the Philippines, and enjoy your meal. It's scrumptious. If you ever travel to Indonesia, don't miss your chance to try some black rice coconut milk-based porridge for breakfast. Disclaimer, it's actually not black, it's more purple. It's called, I'm gonna try this, bubur ketan hitam. Was I even close? This stuff is especially yummy when topped with sliced bananas and cinnamon. They also have papeda, an oatmeal thing made of sago flour. It's starchy, sticky, and looks like pudding, or slime. People in Myanmar are used to eating a hearty breakfast soup called mohinga. It's bursting with flavor. It has ginger, fish paste, lime juice, chili pepper, cilantro, and onions. The soup's made with catfish and even has noodles in it. Salty, sweet, spicy, and sour, all at the same time. If there was a contest for the biggest breakfast in the world, the Irish would take the grand prize. Just think, a traditional Irish breakfast has bacon, white pudding, black pudding, hash browns, fried eggs or scrambled eggs, a couple of sausages, beans, and probably some fried liver. Already figured out how to burn up all those calories? You know, it's a good thing, but some animals clearly let you know they're no joke. Sharks with rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth, a scorpion's venomous stinger, the ominous sound of a rattlesnake about to strike. You get the picture. Yet plenty of seemingly harmless creatures wreak more havoc than even the scariest animals out there. Like the spotted lanternfly, a pretty little bug from parts of Taiwan, Vietnam, and northern China that managed to bring its own terror around the world. Yikes! Let me explain. Only about as big as the tip of your thumb, this bug is easily identifiable. It has gray or brownish forewings with black spots. Under those, you have bright red hind wings that make this critter a real beauty. But don't be fooled. This insect can be an ecosystem's worst nightmare. And it's on the move, traveling to Korea, Japan, and even across the ocean to Middle America. Along the way, it's damaged countless plant species. In the US, it's been infesting maple and birch trees. So, what's the big deal? The lanternfly pierces the tissue of leaves and stems. Then it slurps out the sap. This leaves a sugary coat on the leaves that allows mold to thrive. The plant or tree can't grow after that, and it eventually wilts. This can then impact food production, trees, and developing forests. Now, don't worry too much. This bug doesn't bite or sting people, but the plant loss they cause is enough to get the highest authorities involved in the case. Stepping off the land and diving into the ocean, we see a creature whose body is covered with venomous spines. Meet the crown of thorns starfish. It spends its days crawling around and feeding on coral. That's usually great for the local ecosystem. They eat the super fast-growing corals, giving the slower species a chance to catch up in the race. But when the starfish grows too large in numbers, the real problems start. They can quickly eat up vast parts of the coral reef system. This starfish is even partly to blame for the huge losses in Australia's Great Barrier Reef. A 2012 study showed that they were one of 2 leading causes of coral loss in the last 27 years, them and tropical cyclones. Even worse, their spines produce a neurotoxin that causes a sharp stinging pain that lasts for hours. If you happen to touch or step on one of these starfish, the spines can break off into your skin. Next comes possible infection and a series of other problems. So, stay away from this one. Next up, we have the common carp. You might know the colorful version of this fish, the koi. Those were specially bred to look more vivid. Carps are freshwater bottom feeders. They eat plants, animals, algae, and other microorganisms living in the mud in rivers and lakes. The problem is, their feeding lowers the water quality. Carp uproot the plants they munch on and make the water cloudy. That doesn't allow enough light to get through, so some species struggle. They also produce large amounts of nitrogen. This makes the water uninhabitable for other fish, and that's why many people consider them pests. Unbelievably, the elephant is also on this list of nature's terrors. To find food and water, these giants roam across vast territories. Along the way, they break branches, pull up bushes, and push over entire trees. If they uproot a few here and there, it's usually easy for forests to recover from the damage. But the situation got bad enough at one point for scientists to be concerned. Trees throughout East Africa were severely damaged by passing elephants. Keep in mind, the gentle giants weren't entirely at fault. At the time, there were many fires pushing the elephants on the move. And it isn't all bad either. After elephants munch on their fruits and veggies, they transport the seeds miles away. Ooh, how do they do that? Oh yeah, elephant doo-doo. Then new trees start to grow, and when there's no available water, they dig deep holes in the ground with their feet, trunks, and tusks. That also helps other thirsty animals in the area. Other ecosystem wreckers are kangaroos. Australia's been struggling with the animal's overpopulation recently. A decade of wet weather brought a lot of food and abundant marsupials. They went from 27 million in 2010 to 45 million in 6 years. Kangaroos started wiping out native plants, and many animals were left without food and habitat. By stripping the grasses anchoring down the ground, they cause erosion in areas that struggle to preserve the soil. Locusts form enormous swarms and spread across areas, destroying crops in their path. This leads to a shortage of food, and some species can't survive. The most notorious are the desert locusts that live in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. In quiet times, they cover an area of 6 million square miles. That's almost twice the size of Canada. But during a spike in their numbers, they can cover 1/5 of the Earth's land. A regular swarm that blackens the skies can be 460 miles in size. It contains 60 million locusts every half a mile. Each locust eats its weight in plants every day. A swarm the size of Paris can eat the same amount of food in a day as half of France's population. Goats are nothing to scoff at either. They're voracious eaters with an appetite for shrubs, trees, and all sorts of plants. They can turn rich, dense woodlands into barren grasslands when left to do as they please. The problem became more noticeable in Australia and other isolated islands, where people tried to start a settlement. They dig into the Earth's crust with their hooves, the goats, not the people. When the weather's bad, winds will transport the loose soil and erosion begins. Another cute yet invasive species is the cane toad. They became successful invaders in Oceania, the Caribbean, the US, and a few other places. In fact, they were first introduced to eradicate other pests, but ended up becoming pests themselves. Cane toads are toxic, and scientists link them with the extinction of several species in northern Queensland. They're dangerous to wildlife since their poison glands can take out birds, mammals, fish, and reptiles. They'll compete for food, and they'll eat anything they can swallow – kitchen scraps, your pet's food, and even other animals. Some species will multiply in rotting wood, but the mountain pine beetle will exterminate live trees. The insects invaded the Canadian Rockies, and millions of acres have been affected. They strike live trees by laying eggs under the bark. That disrupts the phloem, basically a plant's vascular system, like veins in humans, and stops the circulation. Eventually, the trees turn brown and rot. It takes them 2 weeks to wipe out the outer layer of a tree. They're pretty robust too, since they're a resistor to temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Once they infest a tree, it's a goner. Jellyfish have been part of the global ecosystem for 500 million years. But now it seems like they're taking over the seas, maybe even the world. Recent strong winds and hot weather spells have pushed large numbers of blue-bottle jellyfish near the shores. There, hordes of them have been stinging large numbers of people. In 2018, more than 1,000 people were stung in Florida. In 2019, 13,000 cases were recorded in Queensland, Australia, in just 1 week. It doesn't end there. In 2011, 2 reactors had to be shut down in Scotland because jellyfish started blocking the cooling filters. Something similar happened in Sweden in 2013 with a power plant being shut down. In 1999, an island in the Philippines had a complete blackout because of jellyfish. Too many jellies can trigger a deterioration in the ecosystem. But even though they multiply like crazy, the numbers aren't alarming, at least not yet. One of the world's most invasive species, but probably not for the reasons you're thinking, are rats. They're expert survivors, and that makes them dangerous when they're introduced to new areas. Like the time black rats invaded Lord Howe Island in the Tasman Sea. They destroyed crops, gobbled up the fruits and seeds of many local plants, and prevented them from reproducing. They also took bird eggs from nests and ate anything in their path. Experts believe that mice first appeared in the area in 1850. Rats showed up in 1918 when they escaped from a sinking ship. In a century, they played a massive role in the extinction of 5 local bird species, 13 invertebrates, and 2 plants. It got to the point that a zoo took in flocks of 2 other endangered bird species to help them survive. There were 150,000 rats and 200,000 mice on the island, but a nearly extinct bird species successfully went back home after eradication. And lastly, there's humans. Come on, need I explain?
Spotted in Japan. These private egg-like sleeping pods allow you to travel by overnight bus and stay in your own shell at the same time. Perfect choice for introverts, huh? Tokyo-based bus company Willer Express introduced this feature in 2020. Each bus has 18 spacious reclining seats with rests for feet and neck, foldable tables, and holders for cups, bags, and smartphones. And a blanket, of course. But what's even more important, each pod is equipped with electrical outlets to charge all your devices. There are 3 seats in a row. Can't wait to test these private pods on your own? You can book them on Willer's line of Reborn buses. The ticket price varies from around $100. And since we're visiting Japan, don't be surprised to find this device in one of the fast food restaurants. It's implemented in a sink to provide disinfecting for the customer's smartphones while they're washing their hands. This system, named Wash, W-O-S-H, was developed by the Japanese company Wota. All you need to do is put your gadget inside this little opening. It will disappear for a while, just like cash in an ATM. But unlike the money, your phone will actually come back to you safe and clean in just 30 seconds. Don't forget to take it out. But even if you forget your phone at the sink, there's a good chance that no one will steal it. Japan is famed as one of the most low-crime nations. One Reddit user posted a touching story that proves this claim. Here's a picture of her shopping bag dropped on the streets of Osaka. When she went back to look for it later that day, she saw the bag lying next to a tree, untouched. Apparently, someone carefully put it there so that the owner could pick up the lost things. Isn't it adorable? Another cool feature from Japan is spiral escalators. Japanese company Mitsubishi still remains the only manufacturer of these twisted staircases in the entire world. This one is installed at the front entrance of Mitsubishi Electric in Ozawa Works. Spiral escalators smoothly go up and down in the shape of a semicircle. while the riders enjoy the panoramic view. But this is a fairly rare occurrence. There are only 91 of these staircases globally. Can you guess a country just by looking at this picture? Australia, of course. This epic shot was made at a camping ground. I wonder how this kangaroo is going to get out of the toilet. You see, these animals are not equipped to hop or move backwards because of their long feet and a large tail. This is one of the reasons why the kangaroo appears on the Australian coat of arms along with the emu. Neither animal can move backwards easily. That's why they were chosen as symbols of a nation that's always moving forward. And this is what Tasmanian lemons look like. No, they don't actually grow without skin. But the local possums took care of it. And they didn't even bother picking the lemons from the tree. One internet user spotted these guys in the garden and noticed that they only like lemon skin and leaves. This creates a great symbiosis because people usually use the insides of a lemon. And since we're walking among the woods, be aware of golden huntsman spiders because they love this habitat. The adult huntsman spiders have leg spans that can measure up to 6 inches. These creepy guys are members of the family Sparacidae. They received this name thanks to their speed and mode of hunting. But they have one more title, giant crab spiders, because of their appearance and size. Although huntsman spiders are venomous and their bites can be painful to humans, usually they don't require any hospital treatment. Check this out! Can you guess the country where this thermometer picture was taken? Australia again! The highest temperature ever recorded in this country was 123 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's not a world record. The hottest day in history happened in 1913 in California. It reached 134 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's another bus feature for introverts. Some city buses in Finland have this thumbs up button to thank the driver when leaving. Too bad they don't have a thumbs down button for balance. What if the ride wasn't so nice? How about riding a Ferris wheel instead? In Finland, you can do it in a personal sauna gondola. The first sky sauna in the world began operation in 2016. Many tourists and locals have been enjoying this feature over the years. This little gondola allows you to enjoy the warmth of a real sauna while riding 131 feet off the ground and looking at the breathtaking view over Helsinki. After landing, the bathers can relax in a jacuzzi and take a shower afterwards. Of course, manufacturers had to be creative when it came to power sources in the gondola. As a result, they built a custom electric heater to provide constant energy supply. Did you know that kebab pizza is a national food of Sweden? Surprisingly, it's one of the most popular fast food dishes in the country. This pizza is topped with kebab meat and other ingredients such as tomato sauce, cheese, onion, peppers, and kebab sauce. The toppings may vary between restaurants, but in general, this meal combines both Italian and Turkish cuisine. It was invented by Middle Eastern immigrants in Sweden, but the original creator of the kebab pizza is unknown, as well as the precise time of its invention. But it's believed to appear in the 1980s when kebab and falafel restaurants began to open across Sweden. In some regions, it became common to offer both pizza and kebab. And at some point, someone got a genius idea to mix it all in one disgustingly delicious course. Please welcome another weird national dish, fermented shark, called hakarl. It's a traditional food in Iceland. Many people wonder why Icelanders eat it rotten, and the reason is quite simple. Otherwise, the Greenland shark is poisonous when fresh. The process of fermentation is rather long and complicated, but it helps to get rid of all the poisonous substances. The traditional method begins with placing the shark in a shallow hole dug in gravelly sand. The shark is then covered with sand and stones to press the fluids out of the body. The further fermentation process takes from 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the season. Then the shark is cut and hung to dry for several months. And after that, all you need to do is to remove the brown crust and cut the fatty shark paste into small pieces. Bon appetit! Peru has the highest sand dune on the planet, Cerro Blanco. Located in the arid Nazca region of southwest Peru, it's known as the Everest of the desert. It covers almost 4,000 feet from base to summit, and the view is absolutely stunning. This dune can be found near another curious feature, the Nazca Lines. Located in southern Peru, this group of geoglyphs was discovered etched into the desert sands. Geoglyphs are basically large-scale drawings made on the ground by arranging lines of stones. They had astronomical purposes and served as pilgrimage sites. Nazca Lines cover an area of nearly 190 square miles and include about 70 images of animals and plants, and more than 300 geometric figures. Some of them are 1,200 feet long. That's why the figures are most visible from the air or nearby hilltops. Scientists believe that the lines were drawn by the Nazca people, who flourished from around AD 1 to 700. And since we're talking about Instagram-friendly deserts, check this out. This isn't a prehistoric giant. It's a sculpture called Mano de Desierto, the desert hand in the middle of the Atacama Desert in Chile. A giant hand reaching for the sky has a base of iron and concrete. The sculpture is 36 feet tall and is located around 3,600 feet above sea level. It's the work of the Chilean sculptor Mario Irarrázaval, inaugurated in 1992. The sculpture is known as a symbol of the human soul's vulnerability and its path through adversity to the stars. You can find it 46 miles south of the city of Antofagasta. Make epic shots and take a moment to reflect on your own path. You could wake up in New York, grab a bagel for breakfast, hop on a train, and by lunchtime, you'd already be in London enjoying fish and chips. What sounds like every tourist's dream could be a reality soon. Right now, traveling between these two cities usually takes about 8 endless hours by plane. But a high-speed train zipping through a massive transatlantic tunnel could make the same journey in just 54 minutes. The plan is to construct this train beneath the Atlantic Ocean, so the stations would look like those trendy underwater restaurants. Not only would you get to Europe in record time, but you wouldn't have to deal with jet lag or feel sick from turbulence. So far, this mega project sounds amazing, but can we really pull this off? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Actually, it's more like a $20 trillion question. That's how much this train and its futuristic underwater stations would cost. It's hard to imagine anyone having enough money to construct it, so specialists thought it was out of the question. But people started feeling hopeful again when Elon Musk dropped this announcement. He said not only is this kind of transportation possible, but his company could make it happen for 1,000 times less than everyone thought. Traveling between New York and London in less than an hour means the train would have to hit a jaw-dropping speed of 3,000 miles per hour. Yep, 3,000. That's about 5 times faster than the cruising speed of a commercial airplane like a Boeing 747. So, how is this even possible? Well, it's not an average tunnel. We're talking about a vacuum-sealed tube underwater, which cuts out air resistance, letting trains zip through at insane speeds. And it's not just any train. It's more like a high-tech aerodynamic capsule that levitates and moves thanks to magnetic propulsion. At least that's what experts think, since this kind of technology is already in use today with the fastest public train in the world, the Shanghai Maglev. This machine runs in China and hits a top speed of 186 miles per hour. What's crazy is that its locomotives are not even touching the tracks. They're literally levitating and floating just about 0.4 inches above the ground. This line takes people from Shanghai to Pudong International Airport, so travelers don't have to worry about traffic and can get to their flights super fast. This cutting-edge technology makes a 19-mile trip take just 8 minutes and 10 seconds. With a regular train, that same journey would be about 4 times longer. Back in 2001, people worked hard over 2 years to construct the maglev train, and they also spent a lot of money, as the whole project cost over $1 billion. Despite that crazy initial price tag, keeping this line running is not as expensive as it might seem. It's actually cheaper to operate than regular trains. Since the maglev doesn't touch the tracks, that means a lot less wear and tear and way lower maintenance costs. On top of that, its propulsion system is impressively energy efficient. As we've already mentioned, this is the fastest operational train in the world, but China isn't stopping there. They're likely to break their own record soon, having already unveiled a prototype of their next generation train, the CR450. This sleek silver bullet had reached test speeds as high as 281 miles. If this project comes to life, if people really start using it on a daily basis, it will be a game changer for high-speed rail. And it could shrink the journey between Beijing and Shanghai to less than 3 hours. That's like 1 hour less than what people take when traveling on today's high-speed train. Now, the team just needs to run a couple more tests to ensure it meets all necessary standards for commercial operations. This car looks like a Batmobile, and it's probably just as powerful. Say hello to the amazing Koenigsegg Jesko Absolute. Its sleek, futuristic design isn't just for show. Every detail on this machine was crafted to cut through air with precision, reducing drag and turbulence while boosting its high-speed performance. Experts ran the first computer simulations, and the Jesko Absolute hit an astonishing 311 miles per hour. But the team is positive that it can go even faster. This beast comes close to the cruising speed of small jets, and because of that, it smashed all records and became the fastest car in the world. When you visit the Coventry Transport Museum in England, you'll come face to face with a terrestrial vehicle that looks more like a rocket than a car. Meet the Bloodhound LSR. It's been on display since 2019, right after hitting 628 miles per hour during tests in South Africa's Kalahari Desert. But the team behind this vehicle isn't satisfied just yet, and they're 99% sure they can go even faster. So, they're planning to bring it back to the track soon, aiming to smash another record. But there's a catch. The team is still looking for a fearless, skilled pilot who can handle speeds over 800 miles per hour. And before you rush to sign up for the challenge, let me remind you, it's going to take more than just guts. You will need a major sponsorship deal too, because getting back this vehicle on the track and breaking that land speed record could cost around $15 million. If you're curious about the fastest jets in the world, look no further. Meet the North American X-15, a legendary aircraft that flew for nearly 10 years and set an unofficial world speed record of 4,520 miles per hour. This beast is so impressive that it actually reached the edge of space during its test flights in the 1960s. Yep, astronauts territory. To put that into perspective, commercial airplanes, like the ones we fly in, usually travel at altitudes of up to 42,000 feet, but the X-15 soared more than 354,000 feet. Now, imagine flying faster than ever before, zooming through the sky at over 5 times the speed of sound. That's exactly what NASA did with this revolutionary aircraft, known as the X-43A. This airplane is scramjet powered, which basically means it's an engine that operates at a supersonic level. It doesn't have any moving parts like regular jet engines do, like turbines. Instead, it uses the plane's speed to push air into the engine. The air gets compressed or squished by the plane's fast motion, then mixed with fuel and burned to produce thrust. For non-experts, this might seem crazy, even dangerous. In fact, we should mention that the first flights of the X-43A weren't exactly smooth sailing. The initial attempt happened back in June of 2001, but the airplane was destroyed after the booster rocket went out of control. Thankfully, the second and third attempts were a huge success, with record-breaking flights that made history. I know elevators aren't the first thing that comes to mind when we think about super-fast means of transportation, but But it's only thanks to ultra-modern high-speed elevators that skyscrapers as tall as the Burj Khalifa and Taipei 101 became accessible. One of the fastest elevators in the world is located in the Shanghai Tower in China, which has 128 floors. To get people from the ground floor to the top of the building quickly, the elevator has to move at an incredible speed of 67 feet per second. That's faster than Usain Bolt at his top speed, but just a little slower than a cheetah. Still, it is super fast, about 5 times quicker than the elevators we ride in most buildings. So if you're afraid of heights, speed, and tight spaces, we suggest you avoid going that far.
It all started out as an ordinary working day for Gary Johnson, who was driving his excavator at a quarry in Oxfordshire. He was clearing the clay when, all of a sudden, he hit a bump. It turned out to be a huge footprint, and no animal from today could have possibly left it. Then, Gary noticed another huge footprint, just 10 feet ahead, and then another one. He soon realized those could be dinosaur footprints. And he was right. There were a total of about 200 huge footprints from 166 million years ago, or the middle of the Jurassic area, crisscrossing the limestone floor. Scientists started digging at the location in June 2024. The longest trackways they found are around 500 feet long. It wasn't the first major discovery in the area. Back in 1997, they found 40 dinosaur tracks nearby while digging in a limestone quarry. This time, the team took 20,000 photos of the new prints and made 3D models using flying drones. In total, there were 5 pathways at that site. 4 of them were made by sauropods, which were huge plant-eating dinosaurs that walked on all 4 legs. Their footprints kind of look like giant elephant prints, only way bigger, because these dinos could grow up to 60 feet long, about 2 times as long as a London bus. The 5th track might have come from a megalosaurus, a carnivore. Its footprint looks like the kind you'd see in a cartoon. It's called a tridactyl, which means it has 3 big, clear toes. Hey, just like me. Kidding. Unlike previous dinos, these guys could walk and even run on there too. Back then, the area they lived in was like a warm, shallow lagoon, and these dinosaurs squished through the mud, leaving their footprints behind. The footprints can help us learn how fast the dinosaurs moved, how they walked, how big they were, and what kind of environment they lived in. You can't learn all that from bone fossil records, which makes this discovery super important. Scientists think that a big storm helped save the prints in such great condition. It could have dumped a lot of mud on top of them, keeping them safe from being washed away. Just several months after the Oxfordshire discovery, scientists found over 260 matching dinosaur footprints more than 3,700 miles apart on different continents, in Brazil and in Cameroon. When they studied these prints, they realized they were about the same age and shape and came from the same type of land and plate tectonic contexts. Northeastern Brazil, and what is now Cameroon in Africa, is one of the last tiny land bridges where dinos could cross between the landmasses freely before the continent of Gondwana broke away completely, around 120 million years ago. Africa and South America started drifting apart around 140 million years ago, and the South Atlantic Ocean slowly filled the gap between them. As the land split, big basins formed, and rivers and lakes began to fill them up. The footprints were found in those very basins, on both sides of the ocean. Most of the prints were made by 3-toed theropods, which were meat-eating dinosaurs. But there were also prints from sauropods and ornithischians, who were herbivores. The plants in those river valleys fed the plant eaters, which helped build a whole food chain. And the muddy ground helped preserve the dinosaurs' footprints, just like in England. The latest footprint discovery, this time in the Scottish Isle of Skye, helped scientists learn something new about the dino habits. So far, they've found more than 130 footprints at Prince Charles Point. And it turns out that huge meat-eating dinosaurs and their plant-eating prey shared the same water here 167 million years ago. Some of the tracks were made by megalosaurs, meat-eating dinosaurs that were early relatives of the T-Rex. Others were from huge long-necked plant-eaters. Some of them were 3 times bigger than an elephant. The scientists looked closely at the footprints to figure out how the dinosaurs walked and moved around. They believed the dinosaurs were hanging out near shallow freshwater lagoons, just like animals today gather around watering holes. Another important discovery from the Isle of Skye is 2 super rare fossils that are helping scientists rewrite the whole evolution of mammals. Some shrew-like creatures today live just around 1 or 2 years, right? Well, those little guys used to stick around for 7 years or even longer. Scientists found 2 nearly complete skeletons of it on Skye. One was a grown-up and the other was a young one. To figure out how these animals lived and grew, scientists used high-tech X-ray scans to look inside the rock and check the teeth, kind of like counting tree rings to find out how old the tree is. The younger creature was still changing to adult teeth, but was already about 2 years old, which is very unusual for small animals. It lived in the area during the Jurassic period, when Skye was warm, tropical, and full of shallow seas and thick forests. Back then, these tiny and strange early mammals were just starting to appear in a world ruled by dinosaurs. But they were the beginning of the long line of mammals that would one day include cats, whales, and humans. Scientists are learning about the final days of dinos from a new fossil site in Argentina. Most of what we know about the impact of that dramatic asteroid hit comes from North America, where T-Rex and Triceratops once lived. But now, we get to see what happened further south. The team of scientists working in a local quarry found bones from hadrosaurs, which are pretty rare in South America. Long ago, this desert area was warm and full of plants like ferns and palms. There was a stream flowing through wide, flat lands, which helped bury and preserve the animals that lived there. Back in 2020, scientists were exploring the area when a paleontologist found a dinosaur foot bone. They kept looking even through heavy rain and discovered a whole group of fossils, not just from one dino, but from several of different ages, maybe even a whole herd. Another super important discovery here was a tiny mammal jaw with 5 teeth found just 2 hours after searching the site. The jaw came from a small plant-eating mammal. These creatures were about the size of a chipmunk and had very special teeth with ridges and grooves for chewing plants. This was the first time a mammal jaw had ever been found in that whole area, and it made scientists realize the site could tell them more than just dinosaur stories. The team also found a tooth from another dinosaur and a claw from a smaller predator. All the fossils found here could help answer some big scientific questions, like were the dinosaurs already slowly disappearing before the asteroid hit, like they probably did up north? And what happened to the animals that survived the asteroid hit? Several years ago, scientists found another fossil, this time encased in amber, that came back from a time when dinosaurs walked the Earth. The world looked very different, but it also had some surprising things in common with today. Back then, the night skies were also lit up by glowing fireflies, and the dinos probably watched them like we do. The amber is 99 million years old, and this special firefly is only the second one ever found from the Mesozoic era. Finding these kinds of fossils is really hard, because fireflies have soft bodies that don't turn into fossils very well. That makes it tricky for scientists to figure out exactly how and when these beetles started to glow. But now, thanks to the newly found firefly, they believe the glowing started at least 100 million years ago. The fossil helps fill in the gaps in the evolution of fireflies and their ancestors. It shows that important parts, like their glowing bellies, have stayed the same since the middle of the Cretaceous period.
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylasolio. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. it has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo-Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future. The world's largest fence spans over 3,100 miles from Queensland to South Australia. If stretched out, it could easily connect London to New York. And if you'd walk next to it, you'd need 6 months to complete the journey. It wasn't built to safeguard the Australian border. Why would it, since Aussies are just surrounded by water? It wasn't meant to protect some important building either. Its purpose is to keep some animal species away from each other. It was back in the late 1800s when Australians started building parts of this fence. They wanted to create a barrier separating the lively, bustling part of the country where cities like Melbourne and Sydney thrive from the harsh, dry outback. They used wooden posts dug deep into the ground, linked up with wire mesh standing about 6 feet tall. Some parts of the fence even have a second electrically charged layer. To make sure this fence did its job, they added some red and white lights to help guard things even at night. A team of over 20 people work full-time to keep things in check here. And every year, local authorities chip in around $750,000 to keep the construction in shape. Why all this trouble? The main reason was dingoes. These gingery, wolf-like creatures are Australia's largest carnivore mammals, and they're also apex predators. They were causing a lot of trouble to local farmers, especially in southern Queensland, where they often go after sheep. For the most part, the fence has been doing its job okay, but it's not foolproof. Some dingoes still manage to sneak through. Other times, wild camels end up crashing into it. That's because Australia has quite a massive camel population roaming around. But this man-made solution did more than locals expected. They thought there would just be fewer dingoes within the fence, but fewer dingoes mean more kangaroos. And more kangaroos mean more competition with the sheep for food. It's not just the bigger species feeling the squeeze. The smaller animals and the greenery also went through changes. With all this competition in a smaller space, locals noticed less diversity in the plant life and small animals. The soil became less nutritious over time, affecting plant growth. Plus, the fence acts as a roadblock for animal migration and seed dispersal. Even the sand dunes are feeling the effects, with less grass cover to hold things together. When scientists looked at kangaroos on both sides of the fence, they noticed that the young pups inside were lighter and tinier on average. The outsiders had bigger feet and heads for their age, and it wasn't because they were eating a different diet. The kangaroos that were stuck sharing the land with dingoes had to bulk up faster to survive. On the flip side, those inside the fence took it slower because they weren't under the same type of pressure. These had to compete with a lot of other creatures for food, so a bigger size wasn't a priority anymore. Researchers are still not sure if this difference is a quick fix or a long-term gene adaptation. What about domesticating dingoes? Wouldn't that help? Many think dingoes were once pets in Australia, but it's not known for sure. These days, they're pretty wild, just like wolves, hyenas, or coyotes. Most of them don't need packs to survive and are solitary hunters with sharp instincts built in. So taming them isn't going to be easy. Still, taking down the construction is not an option for now. Australians are so strict when it comes to making sure dingoes are kept away that they even put laws in place for people who mess up with the fence. Leaving a crossing gate open can put people behind bars for up to 3 months. Damaging the fence can cost people 6 months' worth of their freedom. It wasn't the first time Australians thought a fence could help with animal issues. Before they needed it for dingoes, they experienced a serious bunny invasion. Cute as they are, rabbits were damaging the land used for farming, so locals thought of a 3-part fence. The first one stretched all the way from Ravensthorpe in the south to Pardue Station on the Pilbara coast. It was over 1,100 miles long, making it the longest unbroken fence globally at the time. All these bunny problems could have been traced back to a man named Thomas Austin. Back in 1859, when he first came to the land down under, he thought it would be a good idea to release a few rabbits into the wild, thinking it would add a bit of charm to the place. But since rabbits aren't native to Australia, they didn't have any natural predators at the time. They're also pretty adaptive creatures, needing just some grass for feeding. They reproduce at astonishing speeds too. A mama rabbit can have 4 litters a year, with as many as 5 bunnies each. Pretty soon, their numbers boomed. By the late 1880s, the bunnies had caused so much damage that local authorities came up with a proposal. They'd offer the equivalent of almost $2 million today to anyone who could come up with a solution to this long-eared problem. Nobody claimed the prize, but a commission did gather a bit over a decade later and came up with the fence idea. Maintaining those fences was complicated. They had inspectors keeping an eye, with each one responsible for a stretch about 500 miles long. There were also these boundary riders patrolling smaller sections, using bikes at first, then switching to camels or using camels to haul buggies. They even tried using cars at one point, but they couldn't handle the rough terrain and constantly had punctured tires. In terms of its effectiveness, well, by 1902, rabbits were already hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. That's why, 4 years later, they put up another one. It worked for a while, so much so that the local authorities didn't bother helping out farmers past that second fence with rabbit netting loans. Those caught between the two fences, however, still had a rough time dealing with rabbit trouble. Soon enough, rabbits spread even over fence number 2, and it was clear the solution didn't work. In some areas, even while the fences were being built, those sneaky bunnies found their way past them. To this day, the rabbit population still sometimes puts the Australian officials through rough times. The dingo fence may be the longest one, but it's not the weirdest. The aquarium fence in Turkey might take that prize. This 164-foot aquarium fence was built to make sure the expensive villa's ocean view would be visible from every one of its levels. These days, it gathers a lot of tourists from all over the world, eager to see the variety of fish it contains, and even the octopuses. Putting up a see-through structure wasn't hard. The real challenge was connecting the aqua fence to the Aegean Sea through a buried pipeline stretching across 13,000 feet of land. This ensures water constantly flows, keeping the aquarium clean and the fish happy. To make sure no one damages the delicate fence or steals any of the fish or two, the owner also invested in security. He installed a network of 17 cameras equipped with facial recognition. Visitors are free to look and take pictures, but step too close and you're likely to trigger alarms. Another one of those weird fences is New Zealand's bra fence. If you ever find yourself through central Otago, you might stumble upon a fence adorned with bras of all kinds of shapes, sizes, and patterns. Its story takes us back to 1999, when people in the area found 4 bras mysteriously hanging on the fence near Cardrona Valley Road. Some were a bit surprised, but then others started adding their bras to the decor. Some more bras appeared, and it became a must-see spot for tourists. Its popularity was so high that at times it caused traffic problems in the area.
Surprise! There's more than 7 continents on our planet. Argoland, a hidden continent, may help us understand how our planet will look in the future. To find out how it hid from us and what secrets it holds, well, you'll just have to keep watching. Ready for a mystery? Scientists have been looking for a piece of land that's been missing for over 100 million years. Not exactly newsworthy, since people search for information about our planet's history all the time. You'd think it was probably this minuscule island somewhere in the middle of an ocean. Well, you'd be wrong, because this continent used to be as big as the entire U.S. territory. For a long time, geologists have been wondering whether a massive chunk of contemporary Australia vanished into thin air. Some believed it was simply hiding somewhere on the ocean floor. But thanks to some Dutch specialists and 7 years of investigating, we now know there are bits and pieces of this lost land mixed underneath the lush jungles of Southeast Asia. The continents we see in our geography manuals these days are like scattered pieces of a puzzle. There's even a nice experiment you can conduct to see for yourself. Find a world map online and print it out. Cut out all of the continents and play around with them for a while. You'll see they all fit together. Probably the most striking thing you'll see is how South America perfectly fits near Africa. If you close up the oceans that were formed in the last 200 million years, the continents look like they form a giant letter C. And that C is what scientists call the supercontinent Pangia. It was swimming in an ocean called Panthalassa, and the inner portion of that letter C had a smaller stretch of water called the Tethys Ocean. It is in this small ocean where things get interesting. Back in the Jurassic period, this vanished continent, which scientists started calling Argoland, vanished and left a hole in Australia, now known as the Argo-Abyssal Plain. Geologists initially believed this was all due to a process called subduction. It's when one piece of the Earth's crust dives under another and recycles it into the planet's mantle. Usually, specialists track this continental vanishing through off-scraping. That's how they figured out, for instance, that India bumped into Asia and gave us the majestic Himalayan mountains. But for Argoland, things were a bit more complicated. Bits and pieces were popping up in places like Myanmar and Indonesia, but they behaved like these time-traveling relics, looking way older than when Argoland supposedly separated from Australia. It immediately raised the question, if one continent can behave so weirdly, how many others are out there doing the same? Thankfully, scientists have now put together the entire timeline of Argoland and figured out its mystery. It didn't sink or get swallowed up. It simply transformed into an archipelago, breaking into smaller pieces, called microcontinents, and floating away from Australia. These mini-continents then took a little journey before settling down in Southeast Asian jungles. This discovery fits right into the whole Pangia puzzle. It helps us better understand how continents break up and make up, all in one discovery, revealing secrets of biodiversity and climate back from in the day. If you'd like to find out more secrets about history, civilization, or random day-to-day objects, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Like, for instance, the mystery behind this invisible species line in Indonesia. It's called the Wallace Line, named after the British explorer Alfred Russel Wallace. Over 150 years ago, Wallace was on a journey around the Malay archipelago, visiting thousands of islands. What he found was that animals on one side of this invisible line were considerably different from ones on the other side. This invisible line is like a wall between marsupials and tigers, for instance, or honey-eaters and trogons. But now we know that around 35 million years ago, Australia broke up with Antarctica and collided with Asia, and this continental love triangle triggered significant changes. It didn't just change the way the land looked, it also messed with the species of animals on each side of the Wallace Line. In more recent times, a bunch of specialists published a study saying this collision and climate chaos made Asian species comfy living in the Malay archipelago. Meanwhile, the Aussie animals weren't as happy with the new environment. It was too hot and wet for some, and others just couldn't handle the tropical island lifestyle. The discovery of this continental shift towards Asia might also explain a recent finding of a human species that didn't seem to make any sense either. You see, in this hidden cave in the Philippines, archaeologists stumbled upon a new human ancestor. It seems that about 50,000 years ago, on the island of Luzon, there was this ancient human-like species. The lead researcher believed this finding was crucial for understanding human evolution in Asia, and it named this new species after the island, Homo luzonensis. Now, here's where it gets a bit confusing. The bones found by archaeologists had one small problem. They had a weird mix of traits that hadn't been seen together in any other hominid species. Smaller teeth, similar to ours, yet hands and feet that were more like our ancient humanoid ancestors. It was those throwback limbs in particular that connected this human species with the long-lost Southern Territory. That's because they have this primitive look, like these hard-to-pronounce guys, for instance. Only these two species are separated by 2 to 3 million years of time in evolution. Many have wondered, is Homo luzonensis really a new species? Not everyone is convinced. But it may also explain why living creatures are also affected by the constant shifting of the land underneath us. Now, just because they haven't changed much during our lifetime, it doesn't mean our continents will look like this forever. They evolved from this large megacontinent, and they'll most likely end up in a similar position in the future. On that note, a geologist from a European university tried to predict the future of Earth's supercontinents. As a starting point, he used an earthquake that occurred in Portugal back in 1755, when tectonic plates behaved a bit differently than they should have. After years of research, he came up with a theory in 2016. He believed that the stitches between these tectonic plates might be coming apart, setting the stage for a bigger rupture. It's like when glass cracks between two holes in a car windshield. If this happens, a subduction zone could stretch from the Mediterranean all the way up past Ireland, bringing volcanoes, earthquakes, and new mountains to these areas. If all goes according to this plan, the Atlantic Ocean will disappear, and so will the Pacific, turning into one large stretch of water. Instead of the 7 continents we know today, we'll get a new supercontinent, which he called Arica, because it would have Australia and the Americas at its heart. Now, it's not the only possible scenario, though. Novo Pangia might be another, and it's easy to foresee. The Atlantic stays open and the Pacific closes. Then there's Amasia. For this one, you'd have to imagine the Arctic Ocean closing and the Atlantic and Pacific staying open. Everything shifts to the north around the North Pole, except Antarctica. One final scenario would be called Pangia Ultima. Slow down the spreading in the Atlantic, and a new subduction plate pops up on the America's east coast. Well, either way, if all the continents collide in the future once more, some say it won't be fun to experience. It's believed that in around 250 million years, we'll feel like we're being trapped in a sweltering, soggy plastic bag. Weirdly, that bag will be the best place to live on Earth, the coastal areas. As for the inland spots, they'll be sizzling, like a desert on fire. Many of the species of animals we know today might not make it. As for us humans, we'll need to be creative if we want to withstand the heat. We should be thankful, though. These digital models are still great because we can use them to test all sorts of interesting ideas. For example, how these supercontinents would mess with tides. Taking future space travels into consideration, these models can help us understand the climates of exoplanets too. Those are located outside our solar system. Now, history teaches us that the supercontinent existed a long time ago, around 300 to 273 million years back. At that time, all the continents on Earth were buddies and hanging out together. They formed an amazing crew called Pangia, or Pangaea if you're feeling fancy. The name comes from a Greek word which means all the earth. Pangaea also had a massive water neighbor called Panthalassa. So our entire world was a huge piece of land surrounded by a huge piece of ocean. The megacontinent looked like a giant sea, stretching between the tippy top and bottom of our planet. But as stories go, things change. About 200 million years ago, in the early Jurassic epoch, like dinosaur times, Pangaea decided to throw a breakaway party. Forget about the old ideas of continents just drifting around like big icebergs. It split up into smaller chunks, forming the continents we know today. Oh, and it created the Atlantic and Indian Oceans as a bonus. Pangaea's tale was first told by a German weather expert named Alfred Wegener in 1912. But how did he learn about something that happened so long ago? Imagine the Earth's core as a big, cozy fireplace, giving off heat. This heat creates special swirling currents in the Earth's outer shell. We can think of it as the Earth's crust, which looks like a big puzzle with many puzzle pieces. The hot currents make these puzzle pieces, called crustal plates, move around. Sometimes they push apart, sometimes they crash into each other, and sometimes they slide past one another. It's like a fantastic dance party that goes on beneath our feet. One day, Wegener looked at the shapes of the continents and thought that, hey, those coastlines of South America and Africa kind of fit together. And they really did. So he imagined that way back, all of the continents hung out together as one big landmass. But he couldn't just go and say that without any proof. So how do we know Pangaea really was a thing? Well, there are some clues that brought us to this amazing discovery. One clue is like when you put a puzzle together and the pieces fit just right. Take a look at the shapes of today's continents. You'll notice that they could fit together almost like a perfect match. Obviously, their shapes changed over time. It happened millions of years ago, and since then, the shores of continents have been washed by waters for years. But even so, we can still see how well they fit together. Another clue comes from checking out fossils. We know that ancient animals left a lot of fossils behind. That's how we learn their history and what species there were. But when scientists compared fossils found on different continents, they found something interesting. These fossils look similar. Surprisingly, they belong to the same groups of animals, even though they were far apart. It's not like these animals could swim across the ocean on their four paws. And it's unlikely that this particular type of animal originated in two places at the same time. And finally, the mountains. Imagine exploring underwater and finding huge mountains in the oceans. These underwater ranges and deep trenches are like scars from when Earth's tectonic plates moved around. They serve as another proof that the continents are part of something bigger. When you look at these things together, you get a pretty clear picture. The Earth's continents were once huddled together in the supercontinent. They've since gone their separate ways, but the memories of their grand adventure are still written in the shapes of coastlines, the rocks they left behind, and many more. But it's obvious to us now. At the time of Wegener's discovery, there were different ideas flying around. Some folks thought that the continents sank down to make the oceans, but Wegener had a different take. He thought that the continents are always on the move. He even came up with a fancy phrase, continental drift, to explain it. Later, he was joined by another scientist named Alexander du Toit. He added a little twist to the story, suggesting there were two original continents, Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. But the real party didn't start until the 1960s, when scientists figure out the secret ingredient in this recipe, plate tectonics. And finally, this theory explained everything Wegener and du Toit talked about. Wegener's theory was proven correct after 50 years. As time passed, we learned more and more about our planet. We found out that the Earth used to have multiple supercontinents. Before Pangia, there was a megacontinent called Rodinia around 1 billion years ago. And later on, Pannotia joined the scene about 600 million years ago. What's interesting is that the continental drift story is far from over. Our continents are always on the move. Africa is giving Europe a friendly bump, and Australia is playing a game of bumper cars with Southeast Asia. You know what's on the horizon? Another supercontinent. So, how will this next supercontinent come together? Well, there are 4 major possibilities: Novo Pangia, Pangia Ultima, Orica, and Amasia. These might sound like superhero names, but they're actually ways the puzzle pieces could fit. Let's look at them all. First, Novo Pangia. You know how there's the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Pacific Ocean on the other? Well, if these oceans keep doing what they're doing now, the Atlantic will keep opening up while the Pacific squeezes in. If that happens, the Americas, North and South America, will give each other a big high five. And Antarctica, that icy land way down south, will join the fun too. It'll be drifting northward. Next, Pangia Ultima. In the future, the Atlantic Ocean might get tired of being so wide. It might decide to slow down and shrink a bit. The Americas and the northward drifting Antarctica will probably crash into Africa and Europe. And just like that, a brand new supercontinent forms. There are these spots where the ocean floor is sliding underneath the land. It's like a secret underwater passage. These spots are called subduction zones. So if these secret tunnels will be spreading and spreading all along the east coast of the Americas. The Americas, Europe, and Africa might come together again, and they'd form a supercontinent. This supercontinent would be surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. The next possible supercontinent is Orica. In this scenario, the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans might decide to take a nap and close up. But don't worry, because when one door closes, another opens. In this case, a whole new ocean would pop up to replace them. Imagine a big crack in the ground cutting through Asia, like a zipper opening up. This crack is called the Pan-Asian Rift, and it would become a brand new ocean. With this new ocean comes a new supercontinent, Orica. Australia is currently drifting northwards, like it's trying to find a nice spot at the center of our planet. East Asia and the Americas might join in from both sides. After that, Europe and Africa might link up with the Americas, and boom, Orica. And finally, Amasia. It might form if some of the tectonic plates go north. They can take continents like Africa and Australia along for the ride. They'll be hanging out around the North Pole. All the continents except Antarctica might come together. And even though they might gather around the North Pole, they won't close off the oceans. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would still be open for business. How this grand reunion happens depends on the Earth's tectonic movements. So far, we believe that Novo Pangia is the most likely scenario. It also depends on what exactly happened to Pangia after it broke apart. And when the new supercontinent appears, what's going to happen with the weather? How will the ocean behave? And what about the animals and plants? These questions all light up our minds. Who knows? Maybe someday our descendants will look at the world map and see this incredible journey come full circle. So keep asking curious questions and stay tuned for the next 100 million years. I'll bet you've heard of the lost civilization of Atlantis sinking into the waters off the coast of ancient Greece. The story is supposed to be a myth, but have scientists finally found the lost city? Not sure about that, but they did find a lost continent. Wait just 1 minute, I've lost socks, keys, and even a few marbles. But how careless do you have to be to misplace an entire continent? We'll have to ask our planet about that one. Earth lost what was called Greater Adria between 100 and 120 million years ago. So, how did that happen, and where did it go? The only way to describe the process would be kind of like a snake slipping through rocks or going down into a hole. It's easier to imagine losing a continent when you think about how hard it is to find a snake that's escaped your curious stares. Most snakes don't leave trails. In fact, if you weren't around 100 million years ago to watch that snake slide beneath a boulder, and I wasn't, you'd never know it happened. Just like scientists might never have found Adria if it weren't for the snakeskin, the mountains. Let's say your fleeing snake slithers under a rock. It's long past due for a shedding, so its old skin scrapes off and bunches up right there in that tiny space between the boulder and the ground. That's what Greater Adria did. When it broke off from a humongous landmass known as Gondwana, stick around for more on that here in a few, the Greenland-sized chunk headed north. When it eventually crashed into Europe, it slipped under and caused the meeting place of the two continents to fold and scrunch up. For years and years, it just kept going, and those folds kept growing. In the end, it left behind very obvious and famous traces. You might even have gone skiing on them during a winter vacation. I'm talking about the Apennines and the Swiss Alps. Professor Douwe van Hinsbergen, the geologist who led the research team responsible for this colossal discovery in September 2019, has his own analogy. He compares this folding action to what happens when you stick your arm into a small space and your shirt sleeve can't fit through. It bunches up, and those bunches are like the mountain range. You might be wondering if other mountain ranges have similar origins. They do. Ever push sand together with your hands? Your hands work like shifting land masses, and those peaks of sand you created are a mini version of the Rockies. The snakeskin, your shirt sleeve, the sand. The point here is that mountains get left behind when massive chunks of land smash into and slip under each other. But what about the disappearing continent that leaves them? What happened to Greater Adria itself? Just as a snake burrows underground for the winter, Adria kept sliding beneath the surface. Dr. van Hinsbergen thinks she's probably nice and cozy about 900 miles under southern Europe right now. But wait a minute. Is Greater Adria still a continent if she's underwater or under land? Is a snake still a snake when it's underground? Of course it is. In fact, I know a continent that's mostly underwater yet isn't lost at all. Ever heard of Zealandia? It's also called the New Zealand continent or Tasmantis. It looks like an archipelago, which is a string of islands. But if you peek under the water, you'll see that it's really one continuous piece of submerged land with mountaintops poking out over the surface. Those peaks are the islands. Zealandia is categorized as a microcontinent, which then begs the question: what is a continent anyway? That's a matter of some debate. In fact, we Earthlings can't even agree on how many continents, not counting the lost and micro ones there are. Generally, a continent is an enormous landmass. If you're from the US, you heard that there are 7 of them: Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Australia, also called Oceania, Europe, North America, and South America. European school kids, however, combine Europe and Asia into Eurasia, so they only learn 6 continents. South Americans also recognize 6, but they keep Europe and Asia separate and combine North and South America instead. What's even stranger is that everyone seems to agree that Australia is a continent, while Greenland isn't, and has to make do with the title of world's biggest island. Poor Greenland. This all has something to do with the tectonic plates that lie beneath the continents, but that's a discussion best left for another video. So, where did all these continents come from in the first place? Well, if you've ever looked at a globe or a map, you probably noticed that the 2 great landmasses surrounding the Atlantic Ocean, North and South America on one side and Europe and Africa on the other, seem like puzzle pieces that could be pushed together to form one even more gigantic mass. You might also know that there's a name for that mass: Pangia. Scientists think Pangia, a supercontinent if there ever was one, broke apart 175 million years ago. But not into those 2 big left and right puzzle pieces we have today. Instead, the split probably ran horizontally, leaving a connected North America, Europe, and Asia on top, a mass called Laurasia, while South America stuck it out with Africa, Antarctica, and Australia in a mass known as Gondwana. Yes, that very one that Greater Adria would break free from later on. So, if you took all of Earth's landmasses, continents, microcontinents, islands, and archipelagos and squished them together, would you get the original blob of land known as Pangia? Nope. Not only would you be missing the parts of continents that lie underwater, like the masses connecting archipelagos, you'd also be missing all the ones lost over time. Oh yeah, there are others besides Adria. Scientists are looking for them, and they've already found some. One of those lost continents is the Rio Grande Rise. It's a stretch of underwater seamounts that's been dubbed Brazil's Atlantis. Greater Adria lay somewhere between North Africa and southern Eurasia. Hey, that's right around the Mediterranean Sea, and the Mediterranean is where Greece and Athens are. So, Greater Adria must have been Atlantis, right? Doubtful. Historians think Plato made up the story of Atlantis, but could it have really happened? You might think so if you believe the story of Greek deities punishing the civilization for starting a beef with Athens. But a more scientific theory would propose that Atlantis was simply flooded. Or perhaps it could have been one of the islands scraped off and left behind when Greater Adria dove under Europe. Disappointing as it is to say, the one thing we can't be sure of is that Adria itself wasn't Atlantis. The tectonic forces that shoved the continent under Europe did so over 100 million years ago. That's about 80 million years before any human showed up on our planet to start a conflict with Athens or anyone else. If you look at all the world's continents like broken puzzle pieces that formed a shattered Pangia, you could say that Dr. Van Hinsbergen and his team have spent the last 10 years trying to put that puzzle back together. And like actual puzzles, it's hard to do that when you're missing a bunch of pieces. I'm looking at you, Adria. But they have fancy geological equipment that tracks the magnetic record left behind in the rock's minerals. You see, every rock, stone, and mountain has a sort of imprint of the time and place it was created. It all has to do with the Earth's magnetic poles. They change every now and then in a process called geomagnetic reversal. So, in a nutshell, the specific magnetism of certain sediment and minerals works like a map and calendar. And that's how they know where Adria came from, where she ended up, and who she met along the way. By studying the magnetism of these samples, the team also found out another interesting detail. Greater Adria not only crashed into Europe, but she was also spinning on the way there. A twirling, dancing mass of land whose carefree trip northward would be cut short by an unexpected roadblock known as Europe. Hey, that would make for a great bedtime fairy tale for the kids. Now, my only remaining question is, if Greater Adria dove beneath Europe, could she rise again? It is possible. Continents keep shifting, and they remain on the move today. But they tend to go at a snail's pace. So, check back in another 100 million years, and we'll see how many continents second graders are learning about in the future. I won't be here, though. I'll probably retire. Do you know how many continents there are on Earth? That's an easy one, 7. But wait a second, aren't Europe and Asia one large continent, Eurasia? It looks so when you look at the world map. Well, scientists think differently. They don't just look at bodies of land sticking out of the sea. Geoscientists study the types of rock that continents are made from. When you see the world from their perspective, the number of continents actually increases. Yes, they are not a myth. Lost continents exist, or at least they used to. They are hiding under other land masses. Peekaboo! Researchers have recently discovered one continent just like that. It's called Greater Adria. Sound familiar? Yes, it has something to do with the Adriatic Sea. This lost continent is completely buried under Europe. It collided with Europe and started to sink under it a long time ago. Today, it lies beneath Italy, Greece, and the Baltics. Its size and even shape match that of Greenland, the world's largest island. But how did geoscientists find Greater Adria? It's no longer visible, but it left some clues. Parts of it were embedded in the Alps. Other chunks were incorporated into present-day Italy and Croatia, on the other side of the Adriatic Sea. Limestone rocks from the former continent started to change once they were under the European landmass. Tremendous heat and pressure spread over tens of millions of years changed their structure. Out goes the limestone, in comes the marble. All the Greek and Roman temples you admired on your summer vacation were constructed using this marble. It was sort of a going-away gift from a long-lost continent. Greater Adria camouflaged itself well for thousands of years, but other lost continents were hiding in plain sight. Have you heard of Earth's 8th continent, Zealandia? Probably not, because it sits under the surface of the Pacific Ocean. 95% of Zealandia is now underwater. Can you guess where exactly? Its name is a good hint, under New Zealand. If you open Google Maps, you can see its outline. Look for a lighter shade of blue in the ocean. It should stretch from New Caledonia to New Zealand. This bump in the ocean floor used to be above sea level. It was about 2/3 of Australia and more than twice the landmass of Greater Adria in size. We can spot Zealandia today because it hasn't sunk too low, and that's the best way to discover other lost continents. Imagine the Earth without the oceans. The bottom of the sea isn't flat. There are mountains and trenches. You could put Mount Everest in the deepest of them, and there would still be 7,000 feet between it and sea level. This trench got so deep because of a geological process called subduction. The Pacific Plate got under the Philippine Plate. Earth's crust is made out of those plates that float in a sea of molten rock. Then they bump into each other, one goes down while the other one rises. That's how Greater Adria ended up under the European continent. Our planet is constantly on the go. We don't notice this process because it happens deep beneath our feet. 120 million years ago, Australia and Antarctica were a single piece of land. Yep, the coldest and one of the hottest places on Earth were once the same territory. Antarctica said goodbye to Australia, but it didn't leave empty-handed. Today, there is an oceanic plateau in the Indian Ocean. The word plateau comes from French, and it means elevated flatland. And the name of this land sounds like the title of a Hollywood movie, Broken Ridge. Long ago, it was connected to another lost continent. Scientists believe that it made a land bridge between India and Antarctica. What was this land like? The answer possibly lies in a tiny archipelago in the southern Indian Ocean. These islands are all that is left of an ancient landmass. They have a cold climate. The islands feature glaciers because they're so close to Antarctica. But in the past, the climate must have been temperate with plenty of rainfall. The animals and plants would have been similar to those that we find in tropical regions today. The Lost Continents landscape probably resembled that of New Zealand. Now, while we're in the area, can you guess which continent the island state of Madagascar once belonged to? If you guessed Africa, sorry, you were wrong. Hey, don't feel bad. Look up and to the right of the map. The correct answer is India. Some 120 million years ago, I wasn't around then, India separated from the African continent and went northeast. Madagascar wasn't quick enough and ended up as an island off the southeast coast of Africa. But there is evidence of an even greater landmass, the lost continent of Mauritius. Scientists found traces of the ancient landmass under the island of Mauritius. Today, it's a tourist hotspot, but millions of years ago, it was a real hotspot, volcanoes and all. That's how scientists were able to retrace the steps of Mauritius. They found a mineral that exists in rocks which lava spews out after an eruption. The long-lost land once covered the area from Mauritius to the west coast of India. Imagine if that land existed today. It would form a great mix of Indian and African cultures. The local dishes would definitely be spicy. Now, speaking of spicy, have you had Indonesian food recently? Just 50,000 years ago, Southeast Asia looked much different. There was no Sumatra, Borneo, Java, or even Australia. Just Sunda and Saul, two continental masses that were divided by a deep water trench. You had the extension of mainland Southeast Asia on one side and the greater Australia on the other. Back then, Bali stood at the southernmost tip of Asia. Biologists were among the first scientists to notice the split. Species developed differently on Sunda and Sahul. That's why Australia has unique animals, such as the kangaroo, wombat, and platypus. And did you know that a giant kangaroo once roamed the island of New Guinea? That's because, up until the end of the last age, there was a land bridge to Australia. Today, the two islands are separated by the Torres Strait, but it's quite shallow, less than 65 feet. It's a reminder that this was once a single landmass called Saul. Another ocean strait that isn't too deep separates Asia from North America. The Bering Strait sits today in the place of Beringia. This ancient landmass wasn't that big. It stretched 1,000 miles from north to south. That's just a third of the driving distance from Los Angeles to New York. Beringia was important for another reason. During the Ice Ages, it connected the whole world. Water levels were 300 feet lower than they are today. If they went even lower, you could walk from the Cape of Good Hope in Africa all the way to Cape Horn in South America. Talk about the ultimate backpacking route. Today, you can hop on an airplane and fly to pretty much any place on the globe. The world has never seemed smaller, has it? Well, it has. Some 300 to 200 million years ago, we were all one world, literally. Pangia was a supercontinent that included all of the continents. Its name is in Greek, and it simply means all Earth. But Pangia started to crack up. The biggest gap formed between the Americas on one side and Europe and Africa on the other. Seawater soon started pouring in, and that's how we got the Atlantic Ocean. This process is by no means over. While you are watching this video, North America is drifting further and further away from Europe at the rate of 1 inch per year. Doesn't seem much when compared to the average human lifespan, but in the end, all the continents will reconnect with each other, forming a supercontinent. And it wouldn't be the first time in Earth history that this happens. Honestly, I'm not going to wait around for that.
Scientists claim that Icelandia was a region between Greenland and Scandinavia that was more than 230,000 square miles, but is now underwater. The Earth was once a large pizza pie, with all the continents connected to each other millions of years ago, otherwise known as Pangaea. The North Atlantic region we know today was dry land from about 335 million to 175 million years ago. For many years, scientists and geologists assumed that the North Atlantic Ocean was birthed as Pangia began to split apart roughly 200 million years ago. With volcanoes in the region where Iceland is, the country came to be just 60 million years ago as it broke off and sailed away from all the other lands. And since the Earth was like a large pizza pie, it divided like one. Many of the lands split up into many large and small pieces, creating the continents we know today. But this new theory suggests that the result of Pangia's splitting left out some land that stretched for around 200 miles. And just about 10 million years ago, that piece of land submerged in the waters on the eastern and western side, leaving the tip of the land, which is now Iceland. When plate tectonics move, they grind on each other, which gave shape to our current landscape, all thanks to the mantle. This new radical theory goes against everything written in history books and what scientists have been studying. They began shaking heads, drawing lots of skepticism and criticism. But by analyzing the ocean floor under Iceland and the Earth's crust, we can assume that this idea isn't far-fetched. The crust beneath Iceland happens to be a lot thicker than the typical ones. Oceanic crust is made up of unique melted rocks compared to the land crusts where we walk and live on, and is a lot more denser. The thinnest layer on Earth is the crust, where life takes place. It's essential for water, growing food, gathering natural resources and minerals, and breathing in oxygen. It sinks below to the bottom, but right above the Earth's mantle. It also refreshes itself, since it constantly gets recycled into the mantle and back up. This is why the rocks in the oceanic crust are around 25 miles thick, compared to just 5 miles anywhere else. This is also reasonable given that it's in a hotspot for volcanoes. Magnetic surveys of the ocean floor show layers of molten crust in stripe patterns. Also, given the fact that the Earth's magnetic field changed its polarity over millions of years, it played a role in shaping the foundation of our landscape. But there isn't any concrete evidence to prove this new theory just yet. One of the first steps is to start digging the ocean floor near Iceland. Zircon is a very sturdy mineral that can last for billions of years despite erosion in the Earth's crust. By taking samples and studying them, researchers can estimate the geological age of the continents. This will make sure the crust is oceanic, which is thicker, or continental, which is the regular crust we walk on. This isn't an overnight project and would come with a hefty cost. Another way is to do seismic surveys that can measure echoes conducted on research ships. Drilling holes miles deep in the crust can also help with the research. But this would cost more than studying the zircon minerals. Some fossilized plants unique to both Scandinavia and Greenland might prove that Icelandia was once on the surface and possibly scattered with trees. It wasn't a cold land as it is today, so it may have had forests. But scientists still haven't found fossil evidence of animals common in both lands to suggest anything. But maybe time will tell. The theory goes deeper, which suggests that there was a greater Icelandia. With Iceland, Ireland, Britain, Scandinavia, and Greenland all in one microcontinent, it could be a destination of winter enthusiasts and great for skiing. It could be possible to connect Canada to Greater Icelandia by train over the ocean, which would open up the economy even more. Iceland is around 40,000 square miles, which is already quite big. And if the Greater Icelandia was present today, then Europe would be a completely different continent. Many theories are circulating about other possible hidden microcontinents around the world. Scientists aren't certain of the possibility of Icelandia's existence, but if all the studies conducted were done correctly, then the theory could change everything we know about Iceland and the North Atlantic Ocean. And this could pave the way for other sunken microcontinents around the world. Another theory out there is that New Zealand was the tip of a lost subcontinent, even bigger than Icelandia, called Zealandia. Studies show that it's separated from the supercontinent Gondwana between 79 to 83 million years ago. Scientists claim that it's the thinnest and youngest continent discovered underwater. Craton is a core rock that acts as the main foundation for most continents. It's at least 1 billion years old, but the continental crust that makes up Zealandia is just half of that, which makes it quite young. That means some craton is missing, even though it holds some leftovers of older rocks and parts of the mantle. They're estimated to be as old as 2.7 billion years old. Scientists did some studies on the zircon crystals from New Zealand and found out that they're as old as 1.3 billion years old. The rest of the continents are more than 3 billion years old. Scientists studied the composition of the rocks in the bottom of the ocean around New Zealand. They're made up of silica and granite, which are found in continental crusts. The ocean floors mainly have magnesium and iron-rich rocks. They're also thicker and higher than regular ocean crusts around it. They conducted some studies and collected magnetic and topographic data to see the link between the Tasman and Coral Seas in the Cato Trough region. This is the narrow strip between Zealandia and Australia. Satellite data tracked tiny faults in the Earth's gravity to map out the crust of the ocean floor surrounding the area. They saw the mass that makes up Zealandia quite visible and almost the size of Australia. Even though the signs are there, this doesn't prove anything. It's possible that there are a bunch of microcontinents which all split apart when Australia broke free of Gondwana. Back then, the supercontinent was made up of South America, Antarctica, Australia, Zealandia, Arabia, and the Indian subcontinent. New Zealand is already not the biggest country out there, but if the theories are correct, then Zealandia will be 6 times its original size. Mauritius is a young island that's only a few million years old. Just 1,200 miles off the coast of Africa, it's believed that the tiny island came to life around 9 million years ago. The underwater volcanoes in the region spewed out so much lava that it formed the land today. But scientists found zircon rocks that are more than 3 billion years old. It may also be part of a continent submerged underwater called Mauritia, which is just a quarter of the size of Madagascar. The zircons they found were embedded in solid rocks and not just in the sand, which may rule out that they just washed up on shore from another continent. Some scientists are still not convinced. They suggest that discovering rocks that stand out from the other typical ones brought by an eruption could skew the scientific community to this theory. But just like how Icelandia could be part of Greater Icelandia, Mauritia was once called Rodinia, which consisted of India and Madagascar. Theories suggest that Mauritia was covered in water when India broke away from Madagascar, something like 85 million years ago.
Now, at first glance, it seems like we're on a giant raft called a continent that's just floating around on some molten lava until it hits another continent. Okay, let's make a quick stop at high school science class. Our home planet is like a cake with different layers of ingredients stacked up on top of each other. The Earth's core, mantle, and crust. Hey, where's the frosting? The cake batter on top represents the crust of the Earth, made up of 3 types of tasty rock: igneous, sedimentary, and, say it with me, metamorphic. These rocks are formed in different ways, such as from solidified lava or from the deposits of particles and minerals. The crust is what we stand on, a home to our continents, oceans, and everything we see around us. Then you have the mantle, not the baseball player, the layer that lies right below the crust. Many people think that the mantle is just lava, but it's not quite like that. Just like how you mix different ingredients in the cake batter, the mantle is made up of different types of rocks that are constantly moving and shifting. And finally, we get to the sweetest part of the cake, the center, or in the case of Earth, the core. It has 2 parts, the outer and inner core. The outer core is made of molten rocks and metals that are incredibly hot, even hotter than the surface of the sun. The inner core is solid, even though temperatures there are crazy. It doesn't turn into liquid because the pressure down there is amazingly strong. When you see all this, you can easily think that below us there are endless miles of lava and hot rocks. So, how come tectonic plates move at all? The continents don't float on a sea of molten rock. The oceanic and continental crusts really sit on a mantle. Sure, there's a layer of liquid rock in our planet, the outer core, around 1,800 miles below the surface, but it's separated from the surface by the mantle that's thick and solid. So, the Earth's tectonic plates move around because they're on a thick layer of solid rock, the upper mantle. Basically, this rock is under incredible pressure and heat, which makes it flow in slow motion over time. Think of it like honey or syrup that you pour over your cake layers. As you move the cake around, the honey or syrup will also move and flow. Similarly, the upper mantle can flow and drag the parts above it along, just way slower than honey. And the rock is both breakable and flexible. It can crack and break like a cookie, now I'm getting hungry, but it can also stretch and bend like a piece of taffy. When the plates get caught on each other, they can't move anymore. But when they break free, they start drifting again, like puzzle pieces shifting around until they find their perfect fit. Extremely high temperatures and pressure are the reason this flow happens. It's like a big pot of soup on the stove. As the soup heats up, it starts to move around, carrying heat from one spot to another. Is it lunchtime? And speaking of lava, it's not just molten rocks that travel all the way up from the outer core to volcanoes. When tectonic plates come together and one slides underneath the other, they create a lot of heat and pressure while grinding against each other. It's like rubbing your hands together fast and they start to get hot, or when you start a fire with rocks. And as the melted rock, or magma, rises to the surface, it can create volcanoes. Now, long ago, the Earth's land was not divided into continents as it is today. Instead, there was one giant landmass known as Pangia, meaning all Earth in Greek. Whoa! Imagine being stuck in the middle of this giant ocean. So, over time, this supercontinent slowly broke apart. Its parts drifted away from each other and formed the separate lands we call continents. This idea first popped out in the 16th century when one cartographer realized the coastlines of Africa, America, and Europe appear like they could fit together like puzzle pieces. Later, researchers realized the rock composition of their coastlines was similar, which means they used to be part of one giant mass, and they call that the theory of continental drift. At first, people were pretty skeptical about that idea because they didn't know how such massive lands could move around. Now, we'd all be able to explain that part, right? So, the Earth's crust is divided into a couple of large plates and many smaller ones. All of them are still moving, even though it's in slow motion. We can't sense it, and we won't see any particular changes during our lifetime. It's a process that lasts hundreds of millions of years. As the plates move, they interact with one another in fascinating ways. For example, when two plates collide, one may be forced beneath the other, which would help create a subduction zone. Over time, this is the way you get many cool things like volcanic islands, trenches, and even entire mountain ranges. Plates apparently started moving around 3.5 billion years ago. It took them a while to group into the first jigsaw supercontinent we know about called Ur. Today, its remains make up parts of Madagascar, India, and Australia. Pangia formed 335 million years ago, but it probably won't be the last continent that will form. So, some new generations in the distant future could live on something called the next Pangia. When the oceanic crust of the Atlantic Ocean slowly takes its place under the continental crust, the oceanic basin of the Atlantic is going to close, which is why the continents will end up pulled together. This means the Americas will meet Africa, and Eurasia will be flipped on its side. So, people might live on a giant landmass in the shape of a ring, clustered around the inner sea, or at least what's left of it. Or maybe continents will take another direction and make up a different jigsaw puzzle called Amasia. In this scenario, the Americans will drift westward, fuse with Australia, and pivot to around Siberia. And then there's more. Pangia is the option where the Americas swing together to embrace Antarctica and Australia, and Africa legs off to the northwest. Basically, all continents here get together to form a giant landmass that stretches from one pole to the other. Ready for one more? Nah, come on. A recent projection called Eureka gives an idea similar to Pangia. It's just that all continents here unite to become one gigantic land that clusters around the equator. Maybe this would be my favorite one to live at, with the sunny weather and the beach all the time. And who knows what kind of magnificent trenches, mountains, islands, and other geological beauties we'd get with this giant supercontinent. Pangia broke up about 175 million years ago. As the Atlantic and Indian Oceans began to widen towards the east, the Ring of Fire was formed. It's a path that goes along the Pacific Ocean with so many frequent earthquakes and active volcanoes. This way, Eurasia was unable to cross this border and continue moving westward. And now Eurasia could move laterally along the Ring of Fire. The subduction zones kind of act like a barrier that forces the tectonic plates to move in different directions. So Eurasia could eventually collide with the Americas and form something similar to Amasia. It would be cool to sit there, grab the popcorn, and watch it from the side. But this is something that won't happen for the next 50 million years at least. I'm willing to bet I probably won't be here to see it. Different theories talk about different positions where this new supercontinent might end up one day. But it seems it will probably be somewhere in the polar area, centered on what we today recognize as the Arctic Ocean. Not my cup of tea. Bring me back the sunny one. Wait, scratch that. Let's go eat. So, the distance from New York to Lisbon on the other side of the Atlantic is well over 3,000 miles. At the average walking speed for a human, you could trek there in a month and a half. That's not counting the rest stops and much-needed sleep. Buying an airline ticket or boarding a ship aren't just better options, but the only travel possibilities right now. But if this long journey on foot became possible one day, would you be up for the challenge? The most obvious obstacle is all that water in the Atlantic Ocean. It covers around a fifth of the Earth's surface. All the oceans take up around 70% of our planet. When you open the tap or buy a bottle, you are drinking a tiny percentage of potable water. 97% of Earth's water is located in oceans. It's all salt water, and it's not drinkable. Add this 2% of water trapped in glaciers and ice sheets, and you get less than 1% of water that we actually drink. When you put these percentages into numbers, you'll need a long sheet of paper to write them all down. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates that there are over 330 million cubic miles of water in the world. It's essential for sustaining all life forms, including humans. Oceans play a vital role in regulating air temperature around the globe. If they didn't have any water, the area around the equator would be scorched. This imaginary line that divides our planet in half runs through 13 countries in total, such as Brazil, Kenya, and Indonesia. The world's oceans are critical for our planet's water cycle. You know, like the one you learned about in school? It rains from the clouds and water eventually ends up in rivers that empty into the oceans. Then sunlight warms up this vast body of water, so it evaporates into the atmosphere to form new clouds. Then the cycle starts over. This process shapes the global climate. That's why, for example, the Mediterranean is so popular for the summer holidays. The region is temperate. If we take the oceans out of the equation, the water cycle stops. The area where they once sat would turn into a huge dust bowl. There would be dirt as far as the eye could see. Since there is no more evaporation, clouds won't form. Rain would become scarce. Humans would soon run out of sources of drinking water. The landscape of our planet would turn into a vast desert. Imagine a Sahara-like terrain stretching across the surface of our planet. Everything would become so dry that fires would break out easily. These are hardly the ideal conditions for a long trek between continents, but let's imagine you were able to survive all this. You start walking across the desert land that was once the Atlantic Ocean. What would that journey be like? You would encounter a landscape different from the one above the waterline. Everything below the waves is taller and deeper than the world we know. This is the land of extremes. Take, for example, the highest mountain on the planet. If you were thinking about the Himalayas and its tallest peak, Mount Everest, you are correct. Well, kind of. This mountain range is the highest when you measure it from the sea level, just above 29,000 feet in height. But when you measure the height of the mountain from its base to the peak, then the Himalayas drop to second place. The highest mountain on Earth is actually Mauna Kea in Hawaii. It's a dormant volcano. In the local language, its name translates as White Mountain. Nearly half of it lies under the waves of the Pacific Ocean. Its full height is close to a mile higher than Mount Everest, at 33,500 feet. We can't appreciate its scale right now, but if the Pacific dried up, we would be able to stand at the base of this giant. The bottom of the Atlantic hides a similar mountain range. It's the largest geological feature on the planet. We can't see it because the mid-Atlantic ridge is almost completely submerged. It rises from the ocean floor to a height half of that of Mount Kilimanjaro. The width of the massive underwater range reaches 1/10 of Earth's diameter. The only visible sections of the mid-Atlantic ridge are islands such as Iceland and the Azores. The remotest inhabited island in the world also belongs to the visible part of this geoformation. Perhaps the only thing more impressive than its size is the date of the discovery of its ridge. Scientists charted it out in the 1950s. It's pretty recent when you consider our civilization is thousands of years old. This shows how little we know about what's hiding under the surface of our oceans. UNESCO estimates that humans have explored only 5% of Earth's oceans. It seems hard to believe, but more people have been to the moon than at the bottom of the ocean. The deepest place on our planet lies in the Mariana Trench. The discovery of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge revealed the secret behind the formation of continents and oceans. When you know the truth behind their origins, you'll know what to expect on your imaginary trek across the Atlantic. The ridge sits right between North America and Europe. But you need to think of these landmasses not as continents, but as tectonic plates. These are huge chunks of Earth's outer layer. It's called a lithosphere, and is mostly comprised of rock. There are around 15 to 20 such ginormous plates on our planet. They float on a layer of partially molten rock. Well, they don't actually float, but that's the term scientists use to best describe their instability. Tectonic plates are constantly on the move. They can bump into each other. In this case, one plate goes down while the other one is lifted. This creates vast amounts of energy. On the surface, we get earthquakes and volcanoes. Tectonic forces gave our planet its familiar shape. That's how the Himalayas formed 40 to 50 million years ago. Around that time, the Indian plate shifted northward. It bumped into the southern part of the Eurasian plate. Since the two plates were composed of a similar type of rock, they each refused to go under the other. The only possible direction was up. This process is still not over. The range grows by 1/3 of an inch every year. A similar thing is happening with the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It is widening at an annual rate of 1.5 inches. And there's an interesting side effect of this process. Do you remember the time when you were building sandcastles? In order to build the keep, you needed to dig up a lot of sand around it. As the castle grew in size, the hole around it became bigger. The same thing is happening in the Atlantic Ocean, but on a much larger scale. As the ridge is getting wider and wider, the two coasts are drifting away from each other. The North American plate and the Eurasian plate are moving apart. This means that your imaginary trip in a world without oceans might take longer. For every year you wait, you'll need to cover an extra inch. Now, that doesn't seem like much today, But give it some time, and you might not have to embark on a cross-continental journey after all. The continents will come to you. Now, evaporation is not the only way to drain an ocean. The coast on each side of an ocean might simply close in on it. This is what scientists believe will happen to the Pacific. Some 50 million years from now, give or take, you wouldn't be able to recognize the Earth's largest ocean. Experts ran a series of computer simulations to see where North and South America are headed. The answer is to the North Pole. This is where they'll merge with Asia in the distant future. The new supercontinent will completely change the shape and size of the Pacific Ocean. Geologists have a name ready for this landmass: Amasia. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or